Difficult things to read.
Okay, hello everybody. The camera is rolling. We're going to get started. So let's begin the Issaquah City Council work session meeting for May 12th, 2014. And on tonight's agenda, we will be going through, listening to presentations about the goals, the proposed goals submitted by council members a while back in, I forget what date we submitted those. But then after 3 weeks of looking at them and conferring among themselves, the administration provided responses to each one of them. We've had them now, those responses available to us for the last week or so. And so tonight is really the first step of a two-step process where we're going to introduce and kind of hear the goals tonight and go through the administration response. And then the second step is going to be the Saturday when we get together for the offsite retreat, where we'll be doing some fine-tuning of the goals based upon what we hear tonight. And then actually doing the goal selection process. So the first half of tonight is the presentation of the goals, and then the second half is going to be something a little bit different but familiar to us all, where we're going to look at these proposed goals as well as the existing goals that were adopted last year and the goals that were adopted 2 years ago, and kind of look at them in total. Just to, in a couple different ways about how, if for the existing goals, if they've got started and how far along and what's the budget. And so we have that perspective as we go forward to this weekend when we select these new goals in front of us. So that's the agenda. And the goal setting is obviously a pretty critical. It's probably, along with the budget, it's the number one way we as council members in Issaquah can really help, do very strategic work to, help fulfill the vision of the city, really potentially alter the city's, course of direction. And we get a chance of doing this, once a year. And again, it's really the second step of it is really then funding these during the budget process. Of course, there are other ways we as council members can do things between sponsoring agenda bills and as committee chairs requesting information, but this is one of the two key ways. So the purpose for this meeting tonight really is to assure that everyone, both the council and staff, all share the same basic understanding of the goals and the staff's responses. After the presentation of each goal, each council member will be given the opportunity to express their reaction to the goal and to ask clarifying questions whose purpose it is to help with the basic understanding. So this is not the time for deliberation of the goals. That'll be Saturday. So that'll happen, at the retreat. Now, you may have questions tonight, and Bob, I apologize I didn't clear this ahead of you, but if we may have some questions tonight that can't be answered, someone will write those down, and we'll hopefully have those no later than Saturday. So
You will.
Okay, thanks. And so regarding, we don't have anybody here taking notes, and so I have a recommendation that each of us write down the comments and questions that are given in response to our own proposed goals. So Nina, we're going to be listening to one of your goals, and Stacy may have an opinion, or Tola may have a question, and it might give you some more insight. I really urge everybody to write those down, because this information should help you figure out what needs to be done, regarding your goal, whether that it be consolidated perhaps with another goal that might help you determine this, and just it could help you with the overall selection process in the retreat on Saturday. So of course, though, the meeting's being recorded, so if you don't write it down, you can always go back and listen and watch it again. So that's what I had to begin with. I'm going to be turning it over to, well, let me see. So we've passed around our hard copy here. I believe everybody, all the council members and all the distinguished guests in the audience want a copy as well. We're going to be going through these goals in this order. There are 17 of them on here, and the first one is titled Emergency Management Investments. And one more comment. I see this one was actually submitted by Councilmember Scher. So Josh is not here tonight, and that's an excused absence. We knew he wasn't going to be here. So all 6 of us that are supposed to be here are here tonight. I'll say also we've set aside roughly how much time. We set 2 hours aside for this. Now we actually don't have 17. We're going to go through 16 goals. There's the actual second one that's on the list. We're not even going to address tonight. It's the tax holiday business promotion. And so that one was formally withdrawn by Councilmember Scher. I know he wants to still have some kind of conversation, but at another time in another place. So 16 goals, 2 hours, that's 7.5 minutes a goal. So clearly this isn't going to be a place where we're going to get into a lot of detail. But I'm going to do my best to manage to that time as well. So before we get started, I think City Administrator Bob Harrison has a comment.
Thank you, Council President Winterstein. I just wanted to say that the mayor and the senior leadership team worked together as a team to really answer and address the goals. They spent a couple of days going through them. I also want to say that I think we worked closely with council leadership in trying to accomplish what we believe the council wanted on this. And so the report you'll see tonight from the various members will reflect, I think, that effort and that work. And we really appreciate the guidance that Paul and Stacy and the rest of the council members were able to provide to the mayor and I and the rest of the staff as we went through this. So what we'll do is, if that's okay, by your leave, we'll have the director affiliated with that to come up, and he can or she can either sit up here, or if they have a verbal presentation up at the lectern, and they'll be able to walk us through that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Bob, and thanks for the reminder. I certainly am very appreciative of all the work and effort. I know I'm sure it's the highlight of your year to take 3 weeks and try to crawl into the mind of certain council members and understand what they're asking for, and then and write such a good, thorough responses. So thank you very much for that time, for everybody's time. So yeah, if you have, does anybody have a slide deck? Anybody have slides, or is this mostly going to be verbal? So at least one person, Keith, has slides. So I'm really comfortable with really whatever you're comfortable with. I think sitting around the table and having a conversation is fine, but I will be keeping track of time. So then we'll just get started. If you want to sit up at the table, join us right here. That's fine, and we're going to start. And welcome Brett Heath, Director of Public Works Operation, and the goal is the emergency management investments.
Yeah, so to summarize this particular goal, it has 3 parts. One was a summary of the hazards in the city of Issaquah, what we're doing as far as community education outreach and infrastructure improvements or physical improvements to the emergency management systems. So with regards to the first one, just to summarize real quickly, my response is in here, but regarding the dangers that the city faces, those are outlined in the current hazard mitigation plan, which includes a hazard identification and vulnerability analysis to it. That plan is currently being upgraded, and the new plan should be available sometime around the end of the year. So those issues are addressed in that plan. Our comprehensive emergency management plan is more general, but it talks to general responsibilities during emergencies, et cetera, emergencies and disasters. Regarding citizen awareness, governmental responses, our responses are governed by a number of things. We have standard operating procedures, emergency operating procedures, the comprehensive emergency management plan. We also have an Issaquah-specific incident management team consisting of Issaquah staff and volunteers. So our responses are, of course, tailored to whatever the event might be. Some of them are rather routine, if you will, such as floods, snows, winter storms, and then, of course, we have the other ones, earthquakes and things that are less frequent. The opportunity to do more planning in those areas, situation-specific plans is always helpful, and I've outlined some possibilities for enhancing our ability to do that. And we're also doing outreach through CERT. We continue to run at least 2 CERT programs a year. We have over 500, I think there's around 545 people trained through the CERT program now. There's also Medical Reserve Corps in Issaquah and the Map Your Neighborhood program. So those are all community-based preparedness programs that are ongoing. And as far as the investment in preparedness measures go, we have over $700,000 worth of items identified in the capital improvement plan and the capital facilities plan. So we can certainly do more if all of those things were funded. And if you wanted to increase that funding, that'd be great. But those are the options that are out there. So, any questions?
So, thank you, Brett. And actually, and I should have mentioned this earlier, procedurally, council members, is that we're going to go around after every presentation, and everybody's going to get a chance to make a comment or ask a question, just and everybody's going to at least get their one opportunity before maybe anybody would go a second time. So I'll start with Nina, and we'll go around, and the second time I'll start with Stacy, and the third time with Tola, and so on and so forth. We'll kind of rotate the beginning of that as well. So Nina.
Okay. Just a quick question for you, Brett. Thank you. This is all really good information. One thing that Councilmember Scher was asking about was off-site data backup, so more technical care than human care. And did you have something in here that I couldn't find? Or?
No. I didn't address that specifically in here, but that is an issue for IT and emergency management to be working on. I know we've discussed this with IT in the past.
Yeah.
Not sure of the current status on it.
Sorry, Brett. Just to add to that, that is a current city practice that we do maintain off-site data backup.
So, thank you. So I certainly understand the timeliness of Josh's goal, and I think that's pretty clear. And I think what was surprising to me was everything the city was already doing, and that I wasn't aware of, and I'm quite sure other council members weren't aware of. And so my thoughts on this were some type of not so much a goal, but so much maybe a reporting out of what's going on so that we would all be aware of what we're doing internally.
Okay, thank you. Tola?
Well, I knew about this a little bit because I was council president when we had that gigantic ice storm, and Councilmember Winterstein actually came over to my house and helped extricate from my driveway. And we, Bob and I at the time had talked about various things around that. But I also, this is a really impressive list. I tend to be a worrier, and I'm glad that the city is doing what they are doing, and I'm glad we don't live in a Lahar floodplain. That's all.
All right, thank you. Eileen?
Again, as everyone, this is compiled really well. I think we all knew all these bits and pieces were out there, but this is a very great compilation. I think the one piece for me, it's like, one of his action items is talking about once completed, share the assessment information among public and business. And can you point to something specifically there? I mean, I think all of us probably, if it's a nice quiet day and we wanted to go research, we could pull up our computers and sit there very comfortably, but it's in that moment of when hazards are coming down in our community and you don't have that time to stop and think. So where can we access this? Is there some plan to provide this information we all carry in our cars, or what's the?
Well, for the at the council level, we provided the guidebook for City Council. I think that was towards the end of last year, that was in the middle of 2013, actually. So that kind of provides a little bit of an outline on expected actions and roles at your level during an emergency. We also have the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan and the Hazard Mitigation Plan. Those are all posted on the city's website under the Emergency Management heading. So they're available anytime you would like to read those during the day. And of course the updates will be posted there as well, along with the process, the public process that goes along with the update of the Hazard Mitigation Plan.
I think I was speaking, I mean, we all know it's there, but what happens if power is down? There's a circumstance in which the internet is not operating and people are in need of this kinds of information. Is there other means for the general public to be able to understand where to go, what's the action for a particular hazard?
Oh, right. Good question. So during an event, when we have no power, we have other situations going on, we have a fairly robust public communication system with our public information officer, where we have the AM radio system. Of course, if the web's down, that's not going to work, but we also have the ability to do what we call trap lines, which are bulletin boards, other ways of getting the information out, working with the police department, fire department, et cetera. If we need to do home-to-home notifications, we can do those things. But there are a number of ways. Just really depends on the event that we have. We have the emergency signs that are associated with the AM radio, so we can turn those on, let people know that it's that they should tune in, and they can get information from that source as well. So the more technology, of course, you take offline, the more back to basics it gets.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary Lou.
Hi, just a comment and a question. So I agree with Councilmember Goodman's comment about there's a lot of good stuff in there. I guess I just wasn't aware of all that we're doing, and I'm not sure that I actually see this as a goal, but more as something that gets reported out so we get more familiar. For example, I don't have that booklet that you were just talking about, neither does Nina. And you know that did you get it? I don't have it. Okay. The question is, on the cost side, you had talked about adding some time, but you had mentioned $700,000 plus worth of potential improvements in the CIP, and without looking that up, can you give me an idea of what a few of those projects were?
Sure. So there are things like seismic restraints, so non-structural seismic restraints around city buildings. We have the ham radio communications equipment enhancements on that. We have mobilizing the emergency operations center so that we can take that off-site if we need to, and if the existing facility goes down and we need to go mobile with it. We have
So actually, I just wanted a sample of the kinds of things. And I guess my question would be, if we don't have all of that now, our plans are set up that we're doing something different. So if we don't have the improvements to the ham radio system, it's still functional? It's still...
Yes, it still functions, yes. These are enhancements to make it more functional, upgrade the technology so that we're using, we can do more email via ham. We can do those types of technologies.
Okay. That's it, Paul.
Thanks. In the estimated cost section of your response, you come up with 0.3 FTE to add. Could you just speak to that? That you would.
Where did the 0.3 come from?
Yeah, and
The last page.
it's
Yes.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he knows where it is in the report. What was it?
Yeah, we're currently at about 0.62 FTE.
Rather precise of you.
with our emergency management coordinator, and that's in addition to the time that I spend on emergency management. But we were just looking at the possibility of rounding that out to a full-time position, so that's roughly 0.3 FTE. I didn't put together a specific work plan for that, but certainly we can do more outreach with that. We can do more planning with that. We can do more scenario-specific plans, et cetera. So that is, there's more than enough to do out there in the emergency management world, and that was the 0.3 just rounds that off to one full-time equivalent.
Okay, thank you. So we're at 10 minutes on this goal. Does anybody from the council have any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Brett. Thank you very much. The next one up is number 3, promoting the arts. And Autumn is here. Thank you.
I promised to be under 7.5 minutes. Is that
Well,
right?
that's the whole thing.
Oh, that's everybody. Okay, I'll be quick. So, as I mentioned in my response, this goal is achievable, but we'd recommend working with the Arts Commission on this recommendation. And the first idea was to hold an event, and then the winner's artwork would be permanently displayed in Issaquah. There's just a few issues with that we'd have to just consider. One would be, I think this would limit the quality of the artwork, the number of responses we'd get, and also probably the types of artwork we'd receive. But Joshua mentioned he wanted something that was more of a reality-type show event. So we could do something like that, but we'd recommend that the piece that was the winning piece be more of a temporary piece instead of something that was permanent. This also is a really critical time for the Arts Commission. They've been saving their money now for a long time to do a more permanent display, something that we can commission and spend a lot of time in considering what would fit well for our community. So that will include a public process and a competition and a lot of public outreach. And we could also do an event when that piece is selected for an unveiling or a community event. So there are some options with this, but no matter what, we'd recommend working with the Arts Commission on that for their programming. So that's really all I had for this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Rick.
Stacy, we'll start with you.
So just, I guess, a little clarification about how we normally work with the Arts Commission. So how would that work if we recommended, if there was a goal,
Right.
recommend the Arts Commission, just how would that work? Because we can't really mandate that the Arts Commission takes up a certain.
Something?
Yeah.
We probably would just send a recommendation. I think that they're very open to ideas. They just had a retreat recently, and they talked about kind of what direction we're going in as far as arts. Are we looking more at more, displays of art? Are we looking at more programmatic information? So it's been kind of an interesting time for the commission. So I think they're open to hearing from the council and what you guys would want if this became a goal. And I think what's important, though, is that they're involved in kind of working through their budget recommendation back to you as far as how they would spend that money, just because they've had a certain time now where they've been kind of squirreling that money away and wanting to do something that was more of a permanent piece. So if you did want to do a temporary display as an event, that could be done very cheaply. We could do that really quickly, too. It's not much of an expense. Thanks.
I was just going to add, from a process standpoint, if you just requested that of the mayor, and then the mayor would be able to communicate that out to the Arts Commission, and the Arts Commission would report back and how they would suggest proposing that goal.
Well, I like the idea of having some sort of public event to point out Issaquah's commitment to the arts and our long-standing the various artistic businesses that we have in the area. But I also am not ready to assume that such a contest would produce something that we would want to leave up permanently.
Exactly.
So I support that.
Thank you. Ellie?
Sorry, I support the administration's position on that aspect of the goal. Let me be clear.
I guess I would need to probably talk with Josh a little bit more to understand what he's talking about in regards to holding a competition. I just turned it off, thank you. Because, as being a member of the Arts Commission previously for a long time, we really did squirrel dollars away,
Yes.
For a long time in hopes of being able to put a major piece in town. And so I guess I just need more information in regards to, like you said, is this competition and this selected piece actually going to be a permanent piece, or is this going to be a temporary piece? Are we looking at multiple little tiny, another festival in town would be wonderful if we could bring more artists to the community to show their wares. And so maybe expanding on this a little bit more to be an event in town, not necessarily the culmination of just simply one piece.
Right. And we had talked too, one event we do every year is the Chalk Art Festival, and that's definitely temporary.
Yeah.
And something that includes all age groups and all sorts of artists. So we could expand on that and do other programming that's similar, but we're a little hesitant about having something as a permanent piece that comes out of a one day or a month,
Yeah.
competition.
Yeah, because I know how much time and energy the Arts Commission puts into looking at the selection, the pieces that they do end up selecting.
Right, and
It's
it's
a-
back
it's
to
a-
the council too.
Yeah, it's a long process. Yeah, thank you.
So I really like staff comments. Made me totally think about it differently. I would be very supportive of some sort of activity, but I think going through the Arts Commission and having them scope it out for us would be a really good way to do it. And I think, like Tola said, putting a highlight on the arts and the importance we have in our community, this idea is good. It just needs to be reworked a little.
Okay, so I have no comments. I'll pass it over to Nina. None for you either? Okay. Thank you much. All right, so next up is the goal is Central Issaquah Community Development, the Anchor Project. Keith Niven.
Good morning, or good evening, sorry. Today's flown by. So did Councilmember Goodman want to say something first about this since she's here, or do I want to just jump in? Okay, so I'll jump in, and if I miss something, let me know. So I included a quote because I think this is kind of what it's all about, and it's, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. So the idea here is that there could be an anchor project or a catalyst project or a pioneer project or something that would actually pave the way for something else to happen in the central Issaquah plan area. And so catalyst projects are public or private projects that are planned and designed to cause a corresponding and complementary development reaction on surrounding properties. They are projects of sufficient magnitude to stimulate redevelopment of underdeveloped properties or major rehabilitation of underutilized buildings. The measure of return on investment can include jobs creation, increase in surrounding land value, improved transportation and access, and new housing units. In this context, the development project is viewed as a catalyst to encourage further reinvestment in the area, enhance or improve the physical appearance of the community, and attract additional private development. So the suggestion of possible pathway to do this was to hand this off to the Economic Vitality Commission, and then basically we could go through a process that would result in a recommendation to the mayor's office of maybe what a catalyst project could include for the central Issaquah plan area. That's what I got.
Okay. Thank you. Tola, we'll start with you.
So I like this proposed goal a lot. I think that I was discussing recently the failure of a certain voted attempt to do a transportation bill, and that it didn't have something that people could grab hold of. So many times we have initiatives or we have efforts that we do as a community that it's hard for people to say what it is. It's incremental improvements or whatnot, and I think that this type of a goal is really exciting, and we perhaps haven't had one like that in some time in the city. I have a question about this process. When I see flow charts, I worry that I think what you almost want is you almost want to grab as many possible ideas out there. I mean, you're trying to catch lightning bugs at dusk and get everything in the jar and then see what comes out of it. And I worry that it's not obvious to me that this will capture sort of the I worry that a process like this will get you, for lack of a better word, the usual suspects on things that you could do. So I would encourage a little further thought about how do you think outside the box. I think you pick. I mean, you've got people on the EVC because they know a lot about the city and they've been doing a lot in the city for a long time, and that is important. But I think you also need to combine this, I guess, with some outreach and to see. Go looking out there in wild places and see what you can find before you start applying this process. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
I think the concept is wonderful, to be able to have the idea, and it would probably end up taking a focus group, but to take this particular and come up with some kind of an anchor project. I sort of come away with a skeptical mind about, who's going to do this? Is this going to be a city project? And, then I go to the funding piece, and where does that come from in the process? And, is it the city campus that moves down there? Or, so I guess I just have a lot of questions about really how does that little piece start? And for me, it would always seem to be, it would be a business organization that actually has the capital to begin to move in, and maybe somehow we could encourage that process, whether it's a large a Costco or like kind of business who sees that as a great potential area for their business to expand, or the housing of their corporate offices. So I'm kind of questioning my mind as I'm not seeing how this takes off and how it gets started and how we can somewhat force the issue. So I'm going to just leave it at that.
I think this is one of the most exciting goals that I've seen when looking at the ones last year and looking at the ones that are proposed this year. So I find it really exciting, but I would emphasize two things in the process. Making sure that we have focus groups. I liked the way Eileen put that, but also, as Tola said, broad public input. You have to really reach out there everywhere you can. I think that even though I can't actually visualize what this is going to look like, I find the whole idea extremely exciting. And maybe we get to the end of the process and we come up with some ideas, and maybe, as Eileen said, we find out that we can't actually put something together. We're not sure what it looks like. But I think going through this process and going out to the public and getting ideas is going to be great. So I think it's really exciting.
Thank you. So I struggle with this one because when we completed the CIP, the Central Issaquah Plan, and updated the comprehensive plan, we teed up a lot of things. We got ourselves in kind of the ready position, and remember the conversation being that, how do you jumpstart things? And I think this is the purpose of this goal is around some type of specific project. Keith, you in particular showed, buildings. And as I thought about, what's going to be, how do we help, what can we do to help assure that the vision for the Central Issaquah Plan is achieved, and what role is having that? I remember a conversation being along the lines of, let's put our skin in the game. Let's do something to show that the city's serious, and let's start this ball moving forward. And to kind of show my bias a little bit, I'm thinking, one of the bigger challenges in the whole thing is traffic and mobility and transportation related. And I think about transportation projects, and I don't know. And so if we were to go forward with something like this, I would think where you showed buildings and you talk about going through to the commission, I think we don't know what such an outcome could be, and who knows, maybe that jump starter investment is something that could be transportation related as well. So here's my comments. Thank you. Nina.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Stacy, for this awesome goal. Too, I'm excited about what we might be able to do, and I think that the goal encompasses the comments that have been made. For instance, Councilmember Barber's comment about it might be the private sector that implements it. Well, there's nothing in here that says that they won't. It just says that we will make a strategic plan for implementation, and maybe that's what we discover, that's the way to go. But I want to ask Keith about the estimated cost, and just focus groups will be great, getting the public engaged for creativity, but there are so many ideas out in the world, and where do you find that consultant? Is that what this cost is intended to cover?
So there was kind of two options that we listed in the staff response. One was just using existing resources, which would be the commission and economic development department, and whatever resources that we can kind of utilize. And there's definitely some that we can get without a cost. We offered up an option B, which included $10,000. The idea would be to hire a real estate consultant that we could bounce ideas off of. So if we talk about, a public park or a big piece of public infrastructure, or, is there a partnership that we can potentially leverage to get, this to happen? It's having somebody outside be able to litmus test ideas, so that when we ultimately come up with a recommendation, we have a good feeling that it'll actually have some success. So if we felt like we needed somebody beyond the city resources, that's what that option was supposed to cover.
Right, and I thought that might be the case, and I was glad to see it, because we can come up with some creative ideas, but will they really affect what we're trying to get, and that is business investment in the Central Issaquah area. Great, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy?
It's a great goal. No,
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Are we going to talk about our own goals? I thought we were not.
Clarifying
Guess
questions?
I
if
did,
you still
yeah.
have them?
Yes, Bob?
I just wanted to say, to add to the richness of the presentation that Keith provided, that it's, as we went through this and we debated this at the senior leadership team, the discussion was what does this kind of look like? And it would almost became analogous to the concept that Malcolm Gladwell put out about the tipping point. And so, we identified 3 or 4 projects that are already happening in the private sector, the Raleigh Hotel, the proposed project over at 7th and Gilman. But in and of themselves, even though they're kind of anchor projects, in and of themselves, they weren't the catalyst necessarily. So the question is, at what point does the catalyst, when do you reach a certain mass of development that you start to see the downhill slope of real development occurring? And so I think what some of the projects that Keith put up there were, there's going to be some mix of public and private potentially involved in making this thing occur, whether it's a park or a public building or, a process standpoint related to, MFTE exemptions that we talked about for the private sector. So I think there's a whole variety of things that the EVC would probably look at as part of this analysis. And we kind of looked at it from that point as when do you hit that tipping point to really kind of go forward and you really start to see development happening in the Central Issaquah area.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you, Keith. Next, we'll move on to number 5, affordable housing, and Charlie, welcome.
Thank you. So we responded to the goal regarding affordable housing, which really looked at a better balance of housing with a focus on affordable and workforce housing. In particular, looking at providing housing options for many local workers to be able to live where they work. Forwarding ahead, within the goal, there were a number of citations, including from the city's comprehensive plan, the Central Issaquah Plan, the Economic Vitality Task Force Strategic Plan, and the City of Issaquah Vision Statement, and a number of action items. In our staff response, we covered the existing conditions, and I'll just highlight a few of those. Currently, we require 10% of multifamily and mixed-use developments in the urban core of the Central Issaquah Plan area to be mid-moderate affordable housing, and we included a bunch of the references in the attachments. We have reduced parking requirements for units of 600 feet or less within 1/4 mile of transit. For bonus density, we allow 1/3 of the bonus, or we require 1/3 of the bonus square footage to be on-site affordable housing. And we have some requirements in terms of housing affordability over the long term, 30 to 50 years, depending on the status of the particular project. We also talked about ARCH and a lot of the things that ARCH do. The Regional Coalition for Housing, for those listening in. We talked about fee waivers that we currently offer for affordable housing projects. In particular, in the urban villages, we've done land set-asides and have had requirements for affordable housing. We waive impact fees. We have that option for affordable housing. We have priority review for affordable housing. We allow accessory dwelling units, and the city in the past has also donated surplus land for the provision of affordable housing projects. Looking ahead in terms of what we propose to do in response to this goal, the multifamily tax exemption is something that was discussed during the Central Issaquah Plan, so we have that included in our work plan here. The comp plan update, we're currently working on the housing element of the comprehensive plan. We'll be doing that over the next 1.5 years, so that's included in there. In addition, just making sure that the current development agreements that we have in place that have affordable housing requirements, that we follow through on those. And then creating a strategy plan for affordable housing, making sure that we get that in place and up to date. There are other things that we could do that could be in the strategy plan. For example, directly partnering with development on affordable housing projects, perhaps even above and beyond what we currently do with ARCH in the region. And looking at development agreements where it's feasible to continue to promote affordable housing. Taking a look at our surplus land and looking at to see if there are opportunities there, and also looking at additional sheltering and emergency options for homeless. You'll see the project milestones below that, and essentially we've laid out our comprehensive plan update, work on the multifamily tax exemption, monitoring reports that are responsive to the goal, housing report cards that would be done annually in 2015 and 2016, and then looking beyond at continuing to emphasize those development agreements. In terms of resources needed, ARCH and additional internal staff resources, and we've listed those in some level of detail, but no additional financial resources needed at this time.
Thank you. Eileen, we'll start with you.
I think this is a piece that the city has been working hard on for a number of years, and I think we've made great strides in where I remember the town being, a long-time resident here to where we are today, and I think it's essential. But as town changes quickly, we're looking even more as we're needing that affordable housing, that workforce affordable housing, and some of the other needs for more affordable housing in town. Looking through the plan that's been laid out here, I think this is really encouraging. I think we're doing a good job and we're working towards it. But this, I think the plan that's been laid here, and hopefully some conversation that we have at the retreat to really take it to the next step and a little bit more push on it, because I think there is some opportunities to begin to work a little bit more of this affordable housing level that we need. But as I read through, I thought this was a well-presented plan. Thank you, Charlie, and I'm looking forward to have more discussion on this at the retreat.
Okay, thank you. Now, this goal was co-sponsored by Mary Lou and I, so we're going to skip our comments and go over to Nina.
Well, just to clarify, so from work plan items for the next few years on is what you would suggest to do, supplementing what they had suggested as action items, wherever their action items are. So taking their action items, this is what you would actually do. Is that what you mean? Okay, good. And no additional funding is required because the staff is sitting around just waiting for something else to do. So.
Not exactly how I put it. We're already working on a number of these items. These would be, I think, Council Member Barber described it well, an additional, more emphasis, more of a push towards affordable housing than perhaps we have had in the past.
Yeah, and I would supplement that by saying, we are part of ARCH, which is, and we contribute to the trust fund. Past couple of years, we were able to contribute $100,000. This past year, I think it was actually reduced as a result of our financial situation. But that certainly would cost money, and then it would depend on, how this kind of goal developed on the policy perspective from council and what it wanted to be pursued. So I think the department laid out, their plan. The other thing that I forgot to mention earlier, all of these goals were team efforts, and we have the director, the lead team member who took the input and is doing the presentation. However, contrary to what I tell my kids, I don't have eyes in the back of my head. So if, other team members wanted to contribute, something to the discussion as well, if it's by your leave, if that's okay, just they could raise their hand and help contribute to that contribution.
Okay, sure. And,
Okay.
And maybe even if you think you will, just come forward as the goals, as we get to the goals. Stacy?
I think as I read this goal, it really asks for us to be accountable for the visionary, I guess, ideas we've already set. And so I think it's a well laid out goal, and I just think it's really about asking all of us to be accountable for that. The two concerns I would have would be in action items number 5 and 6, where it says they both start with adopt. And they are about adopting policy. And so I think those would need to be, I know we're going to talk about this on Saturday in more depth, but I would need to see those changed to maybe start with the word consider rather than committing us to adopting policy.
Thank you. Philip?
A couple of things. As I recall, last time we discussed MFTEs, multifamily tax exemptions, the subject is not entirely agreed upon as to the effectiveness of MFTEs in the marketplace. And so I want to make sure that I suspect that could be a more involved conversation. I also, I've long had a real concern about workforce housing. I continue to have a gut level feeling that we do better with affordable housing than we do with workforce housing. In other words, the 30 to 70% market as opposed to the 70 to 100%. And I suspect with the skyrocketing rents, that's just getting worse, is what I suspect. And I know that ARCH has a lot of data, and they will say that that's not the case in Issaquah, but that just, I would like us to make sure that we understand the difference between those two, and that as we go forward, we collectively have a clear idea where the need is. Because I think that I continue to look at, you know, the firefighter and the teacher and the police officer, and I worry that they don't have a place to live in Issaquah. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mary Lou, you want to make a comment now?
Actually, the question I was thinking of got answered in the responses, so I'm good.
Okay. And as one of the co-sponsors of this, one comment, I appreciate Stacy's comment about being accountable. And for me, when we put this goal together, one of the things that's always kind of jumped out to me is, especially in the comprehensive plan, it says ensure that 17%, ensure that 24%. So I'm reading those. I didn't read the whole goal there. And I think when you look in the action items for this goal, you know, first it really has to do with holding ourselves accountable and how are we doing and getting a report. And it's citywide, and it's not just a particular development or sub area of the city. And so, and then it goes on to say, there's some action in there in both steps, 5 and 6, propose or consider, these actions. Well, they may not be necessary, right, based upon the results that we get in our report card or what have you, or something like this. So I think, in my mind, a lot of it is we keeping the purpose of the comprehensive plan central. We're about to rework some of that, and if we put something in there, we mean it, and then let's just make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable. So that was my comments. Any other questions or comments, or anybody else in attendance want to add a comment from the staff? Okay, thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you. The next item is number 6, focus on green building innovation, and David is here to present. Thank you.
Still your mic. Good evening. So since Josh isn't here, the goal here really focused on creating incentives and encouraging the use, and there was a focus on innovative for green building development and redevelopment. And in the response, there was a lot of information that was outlined, including some data about how the city's done so far. This is an area where the city's had, I think, a pretty long history of leadership. It goes back to even projects such as the Pickering Barn. There was, you might recall, the IDEA Home up in the Issaquah Highlands, as well as Z Home, the fire station work in collaboration with private developers such as Swedish, the various development agreements. The city's had a number of strategies that it's pursued along these lines. And so some of the results bear themselves out with the reduced per capita energy use that we're seeing. There's the highest percentage of built green certified homes in our community, through a large part through our efforts with private developers. And we also have a significant number of LEED certified buildings in town. So having said all that, there is still also some related ambitious targets that the city has related to things like climate and waste and other kind of resource targets that are important. From a climate standpoint, buildings are about 2/3 of our emissions from a community or carbon footprint standpoint. And so that will take some ambitious work going forward. Some of that climate work is work that we're doing currently. It's kind of a long process, but the goal is to identify strategies in each of several major sectors, and of course buildings is one of those sectors. So the work around this goal would be oriented around identifying ways that you could essentially help to shape some of those and push those forward even further.
Okay, thank you. Mary Lou, you're up first.
Okay, actually no questions, more of just a comment. I actually like the goal that Councilmember Scher proposed, and I think the staff research was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment is in the proposed goal and why this goal, it says Issaquah is a leader in environmental issues, but we can do more. And I think my sense is that it's generally true about everything that we do. We could, if we could, do more on just about everything. And as I thought about this and of all the challenges and the priorities that are becoming more clear for the city, I find myself thinking that our current level of commitment and investment, is probably just fine. I mean, because we're doing a lot. I mean, we are a leader and we're doing a lot. So, so I'm not so sure that more, because more it means less of something else, either existing or another idea. And so I think we've established its preeminence within our community already. And so I'm kind of thinking about staying where we are. There's my comments.
Thanks, David. And thank you, Councilmember Scher, for this. I wanted just to add to the response in that the thing I liked about Councilmember Scher's comments was looking for innovation. And tell me which one it was. Was it Swedish development agreement that said you need to do one innovative sustainability lakeside, thank you, one initiative, and it can't be any of these things that we already know about. And so to Council Winterstein's comment that, yeah, we're already good, and how do we push the envelope? Well, in this case, it was in a negotiation with a private developer, and they said, well, there's we're making a little deal here, and I like that. So we went forward with that in the development agreement. There may be other opportunities to do that. So I don't know how we might be able to put this on the radar to seek those opportunities to incent innovation, perhaps not just in us, but in the people who are building here. Maybe that's the way to go. Not quite sure. I'm looking forward to working through this a little bit more in our retreat. So, thank you.
Thank you. Stacy?
Yeah, I appreciated this goal and the staff response as well. And I can't really say it any better, so I'm just going to +1 to Paul's comments and +1 to Nina's comments. I agree fully with both of you.
All right.
I'm keeping.
Thank you. Tola?
So this is the largest macroscopic issue that civilization faces for the next century. I mean, it's going to define many things. The issue of carbon and global warming is going to define nation and international policy for the foreseeable future. And it's great that for us to do our part. However, I will also say to Paul's comment, we are already, this almost reminds me a little bit of the emergency management piece, in that this is an area where people may not realize that the city already takes a strong leadership position. We have, SCA's got a policy coming up about carbon targets, and I haven't brought it up with council because we already hit the aggressive targets that they're trying to instantiate, or we have already adopted the same goals, I should say, for carbon targets that they're trying to get countywide. And it's an area where we already have leadership. So while it's fine to discuss further measures, I think we are already doing a lot, and we should be careful that we have finite resources, and we need to ask ourselves if we are already in a leadership position, and how much further ahead of the field we want to get versus other responsibilities that we have as a city.
Thank you. Eileen?
Just one quick comment. I also agree with Paul and some of what Tola said, that I think we are already a great leader out in our neighboring areas in regards to being one of the leaders in regards to building green. If you take a look at page 37, you'll see where we are and compared to our neighboring communities in regards to percentage of homes built green certified. Incentives, yes, wonderful. Let's do as much as we possibly can in that area. The only piece in some of the why this goal comment is code requirements. And there I sort of have to stop and go, we need to be very concerned that we don't impact the growth by providing and requesting more code requirements and more cost to build in our community as opposed to our neighbors. And so it's a cautionary thought in regards to that.
Thank you. Mary Lou? Oh, we've already been around. Is there did anybody help you with this, David? Is there anybody from staff who
I
also?
think we do have an interdepartmental team that includes other departments that are involved with the work. So I don't know if there's any additional comments, but I don't think so.
Okay.
The only other thing I would say, and I think you touched upon it, Councilman Winterstein, is the ASP sign. I'm messing up tonight, aren't I? Sorry. I know. Paul, I should stick with Paul, is the concept of opportunity cost. And so we did talk about quite a bit about the fact that it is dependent upon where council wants to put their resources, but at this point, there's an opportunity cost with investing more in a certain program versus what you are not going to be able to invest in another program, or it's going to have to be taken from another program. So I just wanted to reemphasize your point, Paul, on what you mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Make one final
Sure,
comment
David.
too, is that there may be opportunities for doing some of this work. If you think about innovation and things like some anchor projects, we've had a lot of success with demonstration projects in the past, and there's other ways to identify leadership as well going forward.
Okay, thank you. Next up is goal number 7, a safe and drug-free Issaquah. And David, looks like you're the presenter again.
So this goal, I think we were very excited to see the alignment and the thinking on what was articulated as a clear understanding that this is a growing issue and need in the community. There's some data that's also pointing in that direction that we know from the police department in terms of what they're seeing, but also recognizing that it's a long-term issue that starts with the community conversation. So, in fact, it aligns well with a goal of Mayor Butler to start that conversation and work with the community to even start from a very basic point of asking, do we have a problem and an issue, and then helping to work the community to collaboratively identify some strategies and some actions to take, one in which it's going to take a whole cadre of folks. The city will be a participant in that, but there's also the school district, there's businesses, there's a number of faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, the Human Services Commission. There's a whole kind of list of folks that have at least expressed interest and I think a very strong willingness to participate in something like this and continue to move it forward. Starting with this year, we're in the process right now of working with the Drug Free Community Coalition, which is part of the Issaquah Community Network, and they have a 5-year grant to focus on drug abuse in the community. And so we're working with them as a partner to help start that conversation, in fact, this year.
Okay, thank you. So it's over to me. This is a very sensitive topic, and I know it's on the minds of many people within our community, and I think we've talked about it many times before as well. We're moving the skate park because we want to create a new location that is safe for the users of the skate park, and so we're very aware of what some of the downside of these social problems, especially with drug use. And I myself had a couple opportunities recently to witness the effects of that, even within the last week here in town. So it's important on my mind. I'm not, and just as you were presenting, I had a problem with my laptop here, and I had to restart, so I'm not back to where I was. But I think the general concept, I had some notes myself, so I lost them. But the general concept of putting a focus, increasing, and especially working with the partners, I think I'm very much in favor of that. It's not clear to me what's the best way to move forward, but I know that there are some number in the community, a number of really committed citizens, and working with them and our police force even more, I think, is very important going forward. Thank you. Nina?
Thank you, Eileen, for this goal, and thanks, David, for the response. I was just wanting to know where our goal and how specific it might need to be an effective support to efforts that are already happening, because you list several things here that are already going on, and the action item listed is soft. So how would you specify our goals to leverage or to make sure these things happen, or do you know what I mean by that?
I'll take a stab at it. So I think the question is about how you can start the conversation, but how do you kind of sustain it, and how do you continue the work in the community to reach maybe a goal that we could refine.
And how could we don't want to say do what's already being done.
Mm-hmm.
How do we move this beyond what it's already?
So I think the challenges that the approach to starting a community conversation is important because it involves multiple parties. And it's not an issue that can be easily solved by increasing police patrols or cutting down trees or by the city acting on its own. It's really a more systemic issue. And in fact, I mean, you can all ramp that up to a countywide, a statewide, national issue. You know, some of the trends in terms of drug use and heroin use, for example, those are trends that are being seen elsewhere. And so there's that aspect to it, and so there are definitely some actions that can be taken that will treat some of the symptoms, if you will, but the approach to going forward through a collaboration and the conversation is really intended to start that ball moving forward in a deliberate way to try and get to some of the more systemic issues. And so that's all to say that I don't think we know exactly what those actions are. I do know that having a backbone organization that can help to support the work going forward, so in this case we're talking with the Drug Free Community Coalition, is very important to maintaining that progress forward. And I think there will be some specific actions that the city will want to take to help support that, but they won't be just city actions alone.
All right, thank
So I
you.
don't know if I answered your question, but
Mm-hmm. Stacy?
Well, I have the first, initially the first question, how is this goal different from what Mayor Butler has already going on? And I do think it's a great goal. And the reason I think it is because once we identify maybe what the difference is, if there are any, then I think the second question is what David touched on, and that's about sustainability and sustainability of the effort, because it is going to be a long-term effort, you know, as these kinds of issues always are. So those are sort of my two question areas.
All right, thank you. Tola?
A couple of things. One is that I think that we need to explicitly call out some sort of partnership with the school district. I think that they have as much vested interest in this subject as we do, and I don't think we always. I know that the mayor and the superintendent talk on a regular basis, and I think that's great. But I don't think we always partner as much with them as we could. I think there was the sad tale of the closed circuit camera that we had on the skate park, and it was sort of a cable to nowhere. And I think we need to do better. The second thing is I think back to our goal about an anchor project, and I sort of feel like we should have some sort of concrete, demonstrable, difficult goal here, like 0 heroin arrests in the city of Issaquah within 5 years, like to go a year with 0 heroin or 0 methamphetamine arrests. Something that would be really difficult but really meaningful for us to accomplish, and then to set about steps to get there. Thanks.
Thank you. Eileen?
This is my goal, so I'll hold on to it.
Okay.
But I did just want to let everyone know that the second page, page 42 of this, the action step is actually for the goal 12. So there's a lost page here someplace. So if you're trying to figure out what circulation has to do with,
No, but
yeah.
I should read it somewhere. It's in here somewhere, though, isn't it? Did it just get moved?
Is it?
Yeah,
Oh.
so I remember seeing it earlier.
My take was the second sentence is an accidental carryover from a different goal than the first.
Yeah, the action item on the page 42 is actually for the circulation.
There was one
Mary
or
Lou?
the other, though.
So this is an issue I've been hearing about for a year, and I'm glad to see that somebody proposed a goal on this. I think it's a complicated approach that has to be taken because so many different groups have to be involved. And Tola's right, the school district could be very, very helpful with this.
They are.
But also I would like to thank our communications group, because I noticed this on the citizens list of goals as well. It showed up a few times in there that it's a emerging community concern that's getting a lot more attention, so I'm glad we have a goal on this. Thanks, Eileen.
All right, thank you. Eileen, did you want to make another comment? Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, David. Next up is Old Town Streetscape Plan, and the guy with the presentation is up at the mic. Keith, you're up.
If I may, I think one of these items, did you consolidate? or did you do individual?
Can I talk about it first? And then if I don't say what you wanted to say, then we can go from there.
Are you doing number 8,
So-
Old Town
so-
Streetscape Plan?
So let me go ahead and say that goals 8, 9, 10, and 11, although I'm not suggesting that the council consolidate their goals, I'm consolidating the staff response to those 4 goals into one presentation here. So what I'd like to do is really talk about all 4 of them at the same time and talk about what a recommended action would be. And then I think see how that fits with everybody. My hope is that this will do justice to all 4 goals. They all deal with Old Town.
Okay, so before you go on, Bob.
So I was going to say that was close. That's what I was going to say. And we did consolidate these goals. They're all come at the same issue from a very or slightly different angle. And so as we discussed with council leadership, we think it would be of benefit tonight after Keith does his presentation and we get any other supplementary information, that council have a conversation about this before Saturday, so that if there is some conceptual aspects to this or any consolidation before Saturday that you'd like us to look at, we could do that. But from the staff's perspective, they were all somewhat interrelated around Old Town from a physical point of view, but they were all coming at it from a slightly different standpoint.
Okay, thank you. And Keith, before you start, just to respect the fact that there are 4 different goals, I think, Keith, after you do your presentation, we'll see how it works. But my thinking is we'll take 4 passes. We'll each take a turn to respond to each of the goals individually, kind of to honor everybody's goal that was submitted. So you can do them all together because that's what you're prepared to do, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. So goals 8, 9, 10, and 11 all deal with Old Town. Goal 12, which was submitted by Councilmember Barber, dealing with circulation, that also is Old Town, but I left it into a different conversation because I think it's specific enough that it warrants its own conversation, which is following. And then Councilmember Milligan also provided a goal for Sunset Way, which also could potentially be lumped into Old Town, but it's a separate conversation as well. So what I'd like to do is just say, okay, with these goals, I wanted to kind of show what everybody hit on. So streetscape, placemaking, wayfinding, non-motorized facilities, sidewalk use, circulation and parking, incentives and standards, and the park. So, when you start to look at what you guys are thinking about in terms of Old Town, there's a lot of stuff that you'd like to see happen. I think we all believe that there could be some resources allocated to Old Town, that there could be some, renewed commitment and visioning happen within this part of town. And I think this is a great demonstration of what you guys were thinking. And it helped me to kind of put it all into one place to kind of see, what all we were talking about. And because it is so broad, I think it led us to our suggested action, which was really, we really need to get a group of people together. We need to talk about what the opportunities are in the Old Town area, and ultimately make a presentation to the mayor. I think, there's been a lot of work with DIA. They started kind of conceptualizing a streetscape plan. There's been off and on again conversations about pedestrian park and redoing pedestrian park, and I think every year the parks director puts something in the budget for committing monies to pedestrian park. There's been conversations about building a parking garage on and off again. And for those of you who went to the tourism consultant that the chamber hired's presentation, he talked about, getting rid of parking and widening sidewalks. And so there is just a wide net as it relates to Old Town. And I think really what we need to do is get a group together of interested parties, talk about, as Councilmember March said under the CIP item, we need to talk about the out-of-the-box things. We need to talk about the easy-to-do things. Some of the places that deal with placemaking, they say just plant petunias as a starting place because it shows commitment, it shows renewal, it shows an interest, and then go after the harder things after that. But that's a conversation I think we as a community need to have. So the suggestion is let's get a group together. We can staff that with existing resources. and unfold a process that would kind of gain some, ideas and input, and then kind of work through it from there. So that's kind of why I think it all kind of ended up in the same basket.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
it.
So I thought you were going to go for 20 more minutes.
No,
Now,
I'm
so Keith
cognizant of time.
threw us a curve with this one in terms of putting them all together. Let me just do quick looks. How do we want to? Do you want to do once around for each of the 4 goals, or do you want to? People feel that they can address things in total. Tola? Oh, wait, who would we be starting with? Would it be? It'd be to you. So before you start, I'm just process wise.
Yeah.
You guys have a strong feeling on how we do this?
I don't think we need to do it one by one. I think a lot of these cover the same things. I think our comments can feed into it.
I'm seeing a general nod. Okay. All right. So we have an opportunity then to
10.
comment on all 4
Nine, 10.
and 11.
11.
And 11.
Yeah.
Just not 12.
Okay.
Not 12 or 13.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
10,
8, 9, 10, 11.
12.
Okay. Oh, golly.
Oh, I'm sorry, in 12. So yes, Keith did have his in 12. So he's got it.
I've included 12 just in this matrix, but it's going to be a separate conversation next.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah,
for
it's not
clarification.
part of, I think there's 4 here. Sorry.
We got it. We're good. 8, 9, 10. And 11.
It's hard to know where to begin. I appreciated the synergy that we were working with. You had recommended that we work together, and we really did, even though we didn't always meet and pair up. And I liked how the streetscape identified a baby step or a bite you can chew, or however the saying is, because some of them, myself maybe included, were taking off more than maybe we could handle in the short term. I like the streetscape. Is there in these goals, Keith? Do you think that there are a few, not just streetscapes, of pieces that you could carve out that would be, say, a 2-year plan or something that could be done in a shorter time?
So I think it's all about resources. And I think, there's been a lot of conversation about, would the city have the ability to put financial resources into implementation? Does it need to come from the downtown property owners? DIA is getting together the downtown property owners to have some conversations about an assessment district. That's a long ways off. That's got its own process to go through. If you talked about, say, wayfinding, or if you talked, one of the great examples, I think, in talking about placemaking is you need to have like at least 10 things that you can do to really call this a place. So if you want to attract people to downtown and to hang out, it's like you really need 10 things to do. So you start to say, well, you got the Village Theater, and you can stroll up and down Front Street, and you can get to about 4 or 5, and then you have to get a block off. So you have to go to the hatchery, and you have to include Memorial Field and the community center. And so the problem with that is wayfinding, and there is no wayfinding. If you did not know this area, you would not know that the hatchery is there. Even if you stand at the corner and kind of look down the street, it's not really evident that there's a destination there that would pique your interest. And so part of it, and those things don't cost a lot, but they do take an effort, and I think that that's what we need to do, is have that conversation about, are there some easy things that we could pick off, some low-hanging fruit, if you will, that would help the area and help kind of put a focus on it and a reinterest in it? Absolutely there is. How far we can get down the list, I think, depends on what resources are available.
All right.
And I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because we're doing 4 at a time. So, Keith, the other thing that I wanted to understand better was the sub-area plan, and how out of date it might be, and when do you have to rewrite the whole thing, and how useful is the tool that we currently have? Is it that we're just not using the tool we have? Can you give us an assessment about its value?
So all of the above. So the Old Town Plan is probably one of our older sub-area plans that's on the books right now. The Old Town Plan is and you have to kind of get the nomenclature right. So like with the Central Issaquah Plan, the plan itself is the vision. And then development standards are the rules and regulations that, people have to abide by if they're developing within the area. So with the Old Town Plan, it's the same way. The Old Town Plan is the vision. It's the vision that it is the cultural and business district of our city. And it talks about kind of, how tall buildings are and what the flavor of the area is going to be. And it also talks about sunset and how things are going to transition coming off of front. The development standards for Old Town have things like parking ratios and building heights and colors and impervious surface limitations and all those kind of things. Some of those things are maybe impediments to redevelopment. Some of those, I think, based on where the council's vision landed with the Central Issaquah plan, would be worth taking a look at again. So I think, as we talked about it with development services, I think the general perspective was, the plan and the vision, unless the council really wants to change that vision for Old Town, we think that's generally in the right spot. And really what we're talking about is taking a look at some of the standards and maybe tweaking or modifying or updating some of the standards.
Great, thanks, Keith. Nina, did you have any other questions? Okay, thank you. Stacy,
Did you have something to say? No?
you're up.
Okay.
It's yours.
Keeps reaching for the microphone. As Nina alluded to, I think it's astonishing and great, actually, that it turns out that so many of us were sort of on the same page, although not. We all had our eyes a little bit, on the Old Town area in a little different way. I think what it says is probably most of us think that there needs to be some attention in the area where there hasn't been in a long time. And I also thought it was interesting that it was kind of in line with some of the comments that we received from the public when we reached out and asked for the public to provide comments regarding the goal setting this year. And that was general concerns about transportation and development, and specifically some of the comments about making sure that we don't lose our identity or lose some of the great things that we have in the wake of the development that we've been planning for. So I don't have any comments specifically about each one of these four. I'm generally supportive of the recommendation to look at all of these four together, consolidate them, look at them together, and maybe see what comes out of that. Because at each one of these, I'm not sure I know I wouldn't know how to get in the weeds and figure out how to accomplish those.
Thank you. Tola?
So this is a plan the plan? Is that really what we're talking about? This is the activity that would come up with a plan for something, assumably some sort of larger citizen-involved effort that would be after this, right?
I think so. I think the suggestion from the administration was, there's so many different ways you could tackle this thing. And, you could grab some of these, as Councilmember Milligan said, and just say, we can fund some of these. They're not big ticket items. Let's just go ahead and do that now. Mm-hmm. But I think what we were saying is, let's have a conversation. Dia's been doing some stuff. There's been some other people having conversations about things downtown. Let's give a formal public opportunity to have a dialogue and kind of generate some ideas. And maybe there's some ideas that maybe don't even fall on this list, although I think you guys covered the net pretty well. And then from there, let's make a recommendation, because it's probably going to come with some resource allocation. And I think we felt like, maybe doing that in 2016 made more sense. So I think it's a little bit slower kind of, and that's unlike me, to kind of get out of the chutes a little bit slower than usual and actually take some time to talk about it and make sure there's enough opportunity before we pick a direction like, let's jump into the Old Town development standards and tweak them all up, That might be the right answer, but I think we'd like to have some conversations before we arrive at that conclusion.
So I wasn't involved when they were first coming up with the Central Issaquah plan when it was in its infancy. I got involved after it was a train chugging down the tracks. It seems like that is a challenge, and in terms of getting your arms around this and exactly how do you parse out where you want to go. And, I had some experience early on council with, we're looking at bicycling, and we had a challenge on how we wanted to sort of get our arms around it, and that's a much smaller issue than this is. So I will be curious to see how you look to facilitate this, who you have run it. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that when they do it on the school district side, they actually hire a facilitator to do it, right? Because you have the potential to have some really orthogonal, 90-degree points of view on some of these issues. I'm not necessarily saying we spend money when we don't have to spend money, but it's the facilitation of this process is going to have a big impact on how successful it is. I agree. Thanks.
Thank you, Tola. Eileen?
I'm liking all the conversation that I'm hearing going around the table here this evening in regards to these 4 particular goals. I've been involved in the downtown area since 1976. I've been on DIA before it was DIA, and when it was, I was president for too many years because no one else wanted to take over the project. I was on the central area plan. I also served on the sub-area plan, and I think that late 80s a plan from. So, as we began to see town develop around us and grow, this was always referred to as the heart of Issaquah. And the heart's gotten a little bit dusty down here. And I think it really is time to shake off this piece. And just talking with so many merchants in the area, that there's great life here. But we need to make sure that we're saving that and making sure that the blood continues to pump through this heart of our community, because there is great culture down here, and it was the heart of how this town started and how it grew from this. I love the idea of an ad hoc committee. I like your concept of going slower at it, even though it really isn't you. But I'd like to get it. I like enough conversation to make sure we're going about it accurately, and that there is going to be a plan that we can move forward with. And if it takes numbers of steps and small projects to begin with, but instead of just jumping in there or doing a project and all of a sudden realize as we go down the road that it really isn't necessarily congruent to where we want to be going. So I agree with what I've heard from you and the rest of my council members. So I'd love to get moving.
Thank you. Mary Lou?
I think it's time to get back and look at the Old Town area. I think there was a lot of focus and energy put into the 2 urban villages, and they're looking great. And then 7 or more years put into what we want the central Issaquah area to look like. So it's more than time now to move back into Old Town area and do what we can. Again, back to those citizen comments that Stacy referred to, this is also on people's radar, that the downtown area appears to have been neglected for a very long period of time. So it's great that we came up with 5 different goals and that 4 of them can be merged. I think that's nice. On your approach about looking for some easy things to do, I'm all in favor of that. I'm maybe not so much in favor in the go slow approach. I was hoping that we would see a little bit more this year. But I do think that there's some things that we can do sooner rather than later to show our commitment to that area. And actually, I found Toll's comment about the facilitator very interesting, because I think you've got a really broad and diverse group of individuals, businesses, local people who would be very interested in having a chance to have their say. So, looks good.
Okay, thank you. I actually gave this topic quite a bit of conversation and had a conversation with Tola prior to him submitting his goals, so had given it some thought as well, and had conversation with some members of the public, and the perception, and you're mentioning particularly of the Highlands, and I think about the retail district up there having more or less been built out, and that has created opportunities for economic growth. It's also created, economic competition with businesses down here, and I think that's good. And I agree with Mary Lou's comments about the attention where it's been the last few years, and it's time to get back here, because, and it's been said, I'll just echo the comments before, when people talk about, I think, the character and what's special about Issaquah, if you were to, pick a place in town, one place, it would be centered on Old Town and the Front Street area, I think. And so, and the life and vitality that does exist, especially like I think the art walks are a good example of people voting with their feet on how critical they feel this part of the town is. So we can't, it would be unwise to ignore it or just to assume that it's going to take care of itself. So attention from the city at a policy level and perhaps investment is the right thing to do. And I agree with Mary Lou's. I mean, so let's go plant some petunias. I mean, if that's how we get started, and maybe, you know, so I don't quite understand the wait to 2016 if that, unless you mean in 2015 we are talking with people. I didn't quite understand that comment, Keith. If you mentioned going slow and starting in 2016, could you clarify that?
Sure. So, in theory, this is one of your goals for 2015, which means, you know, we would kind of get the recommendation potentially to the mayor's office by the end of that year. However, what we've suggested as a preferred kind of action, getting stakeholders together and starting to have that conversation, if ultimately the council decided that this was one of their goals and this is how they wanted us to approach this, I think, barring the facilitator, I'm not sure we have money in the budget to hire a facilitator, but if we were going to go ahead and put together a group with existing staff, development services, and economic development kind of leading the charge, we can have start those conversations now. So the timeline and how long it takes to get a recommendation together, I'm not sure how long that'll take. My guess is, you know, I don't know that it would be put together by the end of the year. I would expect it would roll over into 2015.
Right.
So if you were ultimately going to then fund like maybe a big capital project, you know, that would potentially be a 2016 capital project. So that's why it kind of got strung out.
Okay, I appreciate that. And that actually gives me an opportunity to make a comment. And when we started goal setting out for this year, we explicitly gave the instructions that, you know, we need to be thinking long term. So you're right. To me, what we're doing tonight, we're in the middle of the process that we'll finalize on Friday, or excuse me, on Saturday, is the consideration of goals for to be planned for in a budget proposal for next year. So the call that any one of these goals or all of these goals must be completed in 2015. No. It's a call to get started next year. And so I don't think you meant going slow. I think you meant based upon the scope and the complexity that before a meaningful proposal could be made, it will be 2016.
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay. So we might be running full tilt, you know, for 12 months. But the point is that, and I'm encouraged to hear and see that, because it would be artificial for us to say that, oh, we must complete it in a certain period of time. Now we don't have unlimited time, but if the subject matter experts that that there are think that the scope of effort, if we plan it out, do some planning, it's going to take a little bit longer, then I understand that. But if there's opportunities to plant petunias, please, let's consider them. Thank you. Did we start with you, Nina? We did. Does anybody have any other comments? Tola.
So I just want to make sure I understand that right. The way I read this is, again, plan the plan. You're going to plan the plan in 2015 and hopefully start executing against that plan in 2016.
It could be that way. I mean, right now, I think, Council Member Winterstein, God, he's messed me up. This process that we have in front of us is I'm not sure how long this takes. I think if we go down this path, we definitely need to talk about who our stakeholders are, and we might get together 4 or 5 times and have figured out the world. Well, if it's that quick, I think a recommendation to the mayor could happen fairly quickly. However, if there's a lot of input and the outreach wants to be more prolonged, then this process could be almost a year long to do this. And if so, then you'd be informing the 2016 budget for a potential assuming there's a capital project here. This could all very well hinge around private partnerships or, private expenditures. I don't know the answer to that right now because we haven't had those conversations. But I think that's what this is about, is to pull in our private partners and talk about, who's got resources that they're willing to bring to the table.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, any further comments, especially if your particular goal, if you didn't think it was addressed good enough? Nina?
Kind of like the parlor game, the first person should get to go one more time. Yeah, right? Isn't that how it goes? I just wanted to comment after hearing everybody's remarks that here we've been talking about 4 goals, and we're talking about how we can make one goal, but I'm hearing that there may come out of this 2 goals, one that has a short-term objective and one that has the long-term objective. To Mary Lou's comment, something that shows we're serious and gets something going right away and fills in while we spend the time to do something significant over the long period of time. So I think that'll be an interesting way to dice it and put it back together again.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Keith. Thank you for that presentation. Now we're going to move on to number 12. No.
Yeah, 12.
Yes, that's right. You did have that one broken out. So that was 8, 9, 10, 11. 12 is the circulation plan. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah. Not yet.
You fooled me when you stood up.
So this is Council Members Barber's proposed goal, dealing with Old Town Plan circulation and parking. And the reason why we didn't lump this in with the other conversation is it really is its own thing, and I think we need to talk about what it is. So if you get into the Old Town Plan circulation and parking element, there's basically kind of 3 areas that the conversation goes. It's about filling gaps, and that's about really another way to describe that is connect the grid. We have some pieces of streets that are maybe non-connected. There's some missing pieces, and I think there's a lot of conversation about you could fill in the missing pieces, and that's kind of what this 1 through 6 under filling gaps are. And then traffic calming. Traffic calming was another section in the plan element, and it listed a bunch of projects that were under traffic calming. And then there was transit, which included ultimately the trolley, which wasn't listed there but is on the next page. So then there was an implementation table. And the implementation table, as you can tell from this slide, has a lot of projects in it. And some of them we have done, and there's others that we have not done. So I think when we talk about the Old Town Circulation Plan, I think we need to start here and talk about what's currently approved and where we are with it. And Sheldon's here to answer questions because I don't know specifically what all these projects are, but if you guys have questions about what some of these are, I'm going to have my partner in crime answer those. But really, I think where we started was, here's what you've got on the books, and each one of these projects is intended to be a capital project with, a dollar amount associated with it, and it all has, it's a lot of money. So here's, I think that's where we're going to stop at the moment is this is what's there. That's all I got.
Okay. Do you have a crime partner who wants to make some comments?
I don't know if he wants to make any comments at this point or not.
No comments to this.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sheldon. Stacy, I'll start with you.
So the question I had initially was about the cost, the estimated cost. That's $300,000 to $500,000 to update. What, this?
The element, yes.
That's what this is?
No, it's essentially to update the element, and what it entails is involving stakeholders in a very close way, developing a parking and management element within the element itself, doing some traffic modeling to ensure that the circulation plan actually works when it gets said and done, and then developing a list of capital projects with planning level cost estimates, which means getting into a little bit of detail about what these projects mean. It also evaluates the resource needs associated with the plan, and then develops a funding plan to be able to implement it.
Oh.
These costs are basically to update the plan and develop a funding plan that will allow you to implement. So implementation is additional costs on top of the $300,000 to $500,000.
And is this part of the existing plan?
What Keith has listed there is in the existing element.
Okay.
But there may be other ideas that could come out of the stakeholder discussions and things like that that may come up with some other circulation elements that may be more palatable and actually work better.
So it'd be more than this? It'd be this
It
plus
could be more than this. It could be less than this on
Okay.
the capital side. It's really it's an unknown what it would end up being.
I think, a good comparable would be if you think back to when we started the North Issaquah suite of projects, we started with a full list of projects, and then we hired a consultant who came in, did an evaluation to look at how the whole system worked, and then ended up getting narrowed down to, was it 7 or 8?
Yeah, about
12
five
projects,
or so.
5 projects, that felt we could get the biggest bang for our dollars to deal with the whole system and improvements that would be made. So I think this, in a sense, what I hear you saying is this would be a comparable kind of process where we'd look at the whole suite of projects, do that evaluation, and come up with a suite of projects that would be recommended.
Right, and that's just on the capital side of things. There's the parking plan, developing that and so forth, because one of the things that's critical to circulation is also how do you address your parking when you have to do modifications of streets and things of that sort. So you've got to have a parking plan that everybody buys into, which that's a huge stakeholder process to go through.
Okay. And then this was just put up here, and I didn't read it before we got here, so I admit that. I'm just curious off the top of my head how road overlay helps circulation and
That question, I couldn't answer how that
Okay.
helps the circulation, except it makes the roads better for bicycles and peds and cars to roll on.
all right, fair enough. Thanks.
Tola?
What's your deliverables and what are the dates on them?
This is about a 3 to 5 year process to go through all the studies and so forth. And I'd say deliverables would be an updated element with a parking management plan and a list of capital projects that you would have to figure out how to implement and fund.
I think there should be that should be called out and a aspirational date assigned to it.
Okay.
Thank you. Eileen? Oh, this is your goal. Okay.
goal, yeah.
Yep, we'll come back to you. Sorry about that. Mary Lou?
It maybe just my not being familiar with the process, but I had sticker shock when I saw the price, and I liked the idea that we wanted to take a comprehensive look, but I had a hard time when I saw the dollars. So I was wondering, are we looking at the only kind of package we could have, or is there another way of doing this? I mean, we have to. This is the route. It's 300 to 500. There isn't another approach we could take.
This
a lesser
would be kind of a full meal deal for the Old Town area specifically, but Charlie's going to speak to a transportation master plan where if you integrate this within that goal, there is some cost savings involved
Bring that to it.
as a result of some overlap.
That's
but,
actually what I was looking
yeah.
for. Okay. That was it.
All right, thank you. Actually, Eileen, I'd like to ask you a question. So when I read your goal and it says why this goal, the AM and PM commuter traffic has a negative impact on the downtown business district. There is a renewed effort by DIA, Chamber, EVC, and the tourism plan still in the development phase to improve this area. The success of these efforts will have a limited success without addressing the traffic issues on Front Street. So I'm curious in your reaction because as the person who brought forward the goal, when I read why and this seems to be perhaps addressing your goal, but also maybe a lot more. Almost to the point of, like, I'm seeing this list for the first time, like Stacy pointed out. So how does overlays fit into this? But this is very comprehensive, and I'm just looking for some guidance from you.
When I saw the list too, I initially went, there's a lot here, and I've been trying to, it came, for us just to be able to see this evening without putting a lot of study into it, I quickly picked up the road overlays too and started crossing those off of the list. And then I tried to start from the top, going down and saying exactly which of these would then truly have an impact to the traffic flow through the core of town, through the downtown area. Third Avenue Bridge is one that had been looked at a number of times and has never had any legs to keep moving forward on, and I don't know if it ever will. So are there other pieces in here too? They're all on there, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're funded and dated and ready to roll. This is...
So there was a task force that was part of the Old Town planning process, and I think some of these, like some of the overlays, I think you can maybe attribute to the fact that there was a task force that developed recommendations. But I think you can look at some things like, there was a concept to turn First Avenue basically to make a one-way couplet around Front Street, and so there's ideas that address specifically the Front Street traffic. The other thing that is not on the list, it's the road project none of us shall name. It was originally part of this list and that's why there's a 2009 update. It was all reference to it was removed. But there is things on here. It is Third Avenue Bridge connects to Gilman and helps connect the grid. So, there's a lot of things on here that actually address specifically, I think, the proposed goal that Councilmember Barber suggested. I think what the response from the administration was really, but this is old. This is 14 years, almost 15 years old. We need to resync this with our current TIP and our current kind of transportation thoughts if we really want to move some of those projects forward. Because I think otherwise you just have a big list of stuff here.
Well, if you take a look at it, it is a big list, Paul, but the bottom three are talking about parking. The RT8 Transit Hub, my gosh, that's 14 years old. That was supposed to be happening down here, and it's not going to happen. So I think and then you talk about residential walkways on Sunset. That really does need to happen. But I don't believe there is not going to be any opposition to that, or be careful. So I think once you narrow down and take off a lot of these pieces, it is a big project, but it's not as daunting as when that slide first went up there, when you start to knock away some of these. I think it's an important piece. We just had Roger Brooks do the tourism presentation, and that's where a lot of this came from as you began to talk with people in the community, and the fact that, the idea of being able to have an outside dining experience on Front Street as you're going through town, and then you walked it at night between the dinner hour, and you realized that the traffic was stopped and stalled and moving slowly, and probably not the most enjoyable dining experience. So then how do you take what he's trying to provide for the city with his tourism plan and making sure that it's a reality that could perhaps happen, plus still provide an experience for visitors and tourists to come to our community and be able to walk around and find parking and enjoy the downtown core of our city. So I'll be interested to see what Charlie has in regards to the transportation master plan.
Okay, so just to complete my thoughts, thank you, Eileen, is that I think I'll be in a better position to really decide on this. I think when I hear the rest of everything transportation, because to me this is a transportation ticket, and yet it's tied so closely to central areas. Now, so that was the end of my comments. I think where do we start? Stacy, Nina, have you had an opportunity to comment yet? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we did start with
So the documents that you have here and the slides that we've had too, how are those going to be made available to us for Saturday?
I will email them to you all tomorrow.
Oh, excellent. Okay, and then just to understand the investment estimate of $300,000, that gives us a plan, but still then we don't have a financing plan. There would still need to be more work to do before we start working. Is that fair?
Part of it was to develop a funding plan and strategy. That was one of the tasks identified in that scope. The last paragraph of the staff response lays out the different products essentially that were going to be produced as part of this. Just didn't lay out the schedule.
Okay, so that's included. Okay.
Yeah, funding plan.
That's included. Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Stacy, did you want to make another comment? Saw
I
your hand
did,
up.
as I
Sure.
had an opportunity to look at this a little more closely. I'm trying to figure out which items the city's actually completed. So I'm going to assume that the city did the Creekway Parking Street improvements and the Rainier Boulevard Parking Street improvements, but the other four on the other side, did we do the transit center? Did the city do?
So the study was done, and there's no transit center here.
Who did
the
that?
study's
Was it
done.
who did the study? The city in combination with Metro and. Okay.
And Sun Transit.
Okay. So. Trolley. 200's in trouble. So we have an element that has had almost nothing completed. Is the way I look at it.
All right, thank you.
Well, it's negative, but it's true.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay, so thank you. We'll move on now to the next goal, which is the
Sunset Way.
East Sunset Way improvements. And we have another slide deck.
So East Sunset Way, I think we all know what East Sunset Way looks like. So the issues that were raised in the proposed goal is funding for those improvements. You know, right now Sunset is on the TIP, but it's on the second set of the project, so it's not within the 6-year, it's beyond that. There's missing sidewalks, you know, how bicycles utilize Sunset Way is challenging in some places. You know, it is a gateway from I-90. As you get off I-90 at Sunset and come to downtown, it is the kind of your main approach. It's also, as we talked about a little bit earlier, that competition with Issaquah Highlands. You know, it is clearly the spine that connects Issaquah Highlands to Old Town. And so, you know, how we make that connection, I think, is really important. And there's been, for those of you who haven't noticed, there's been a number of properties for sale. So there is this kind of perspective or perception that there is transitioning land uses currently on Sunset, and maybe it could use a little bit of direction to make sure it goes the right way. So there's actually 3 different ways. There's probably more than 3, but I think there's 3 different ways you could deal with this. One is we've talked about, you know, appointing committees. Just kind of another little kind of let's do a committee thing, talk about it, figure out what to deal with it. A second approach would be to maybe suggest that we kind of craft a Sunset Way element specifically to the Old Town Plan. And I think that we could talk about, you know, putting the right level of detail and add that in as an addendum to the Old Town Plan. And then third, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is, you know, maybe this item as well as the previous one could be included in the Transportation Master Plan, which is another proposed goal that we're going to hear about next. So, you know, I think there's, you know, maybe there's more choices about different ways you can deal with this particular proposed goal, but here's 3 that kind of came to our mind. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Dola, we're starting with you.
Couple of things. So it makes reference to moving Sunset Way project from number 17 to number 10 or higher. What's the language of number 17?
I need my
Sheldon can
tape
clarify
here.
my, a little bit of my misunderstanding of the list there. So, thank you.
And then I want you to come back to this color because I can't get enough of these these blocks.
One minute, let me
Pots.
pull back in here what the,
Paint pots.
Paint pots.
what was, so.
I
the
can
que-
actually answer that and
the-
prove that you taught me something. So
you
I
might
was,
guess,
I was
Councilwoman.
hopeful that with the change in the Kalahari PAA, that there would be less financial obligation in the roads that border the Kalahari PAA, and I wanted to snatch some of that for Sunset, East Sunset. And I learned in a very informative chat with Sheldon that that was not on the table and that money is fully committed. So I'd still like to move it up the list, but I didn't have a place to take after we had a fire. So sorry about that.
But what is it? When you say the number 17?
I was just looking for dollars.
Yeah, no. But I mean, it says number 17. What are the elements to this? Because the reason I ask is, to me, one of the philosophically, I like this a lot, and one of the reasons that I like it is I think not only do you get a better connector between one of our built-out and thriving communities and down into Old Town where people want to go, but there's actually also cross-links in there, right? My son and I can ride from there all the way out to Preston and beyond. But that bit from the library to the freeway is not a bit that we currently enjoy. And so you not only do you connect things up to folks in the Highlands, but sort of the network noting that you get if that can be sort of a spine where you have all these things that sort of branch off, and eventually you might have mountain bikers taking the Preston Trail all the way out and hooking around and getting up on Tiger and doing all sorts of fun stuff and spending the money downtown. So I like that. However, I want to make sure that the way that this is worded and the way that it goes in, the action items here, I see Complete Streets, sure, Complete Streets design. I know that Complete Streets is a target of, every year and budget things we wind up rating Complete Streets. So how do we make sure that the non-motorized piece of this stays and stays an integral part of it?
That stays an integral part of the Sunset Way improvements?
Or of this goal?
The non-motorized improvements, if you to do them without making them a throwaway for when you actually do the rest of the improvements, you're essentially getting upwards of the full cost of the whole roadway project.
Say that again. I'm sorry. I don't understand what you just said.
The roadway, the way it is right now, to be able to redo the non-motorized elements of it, those elements are substantial and actually cause widening and things like that. So if you were to do it in a abbreviated way to keep your costs down, which still wouldn't be inexpensive, it'd still be expensive, you're essentially building facilities that you're going to end up tearing up when you go to do the whole roadway. So you would want to build them where you need to at the fullest extent of the future road, and so you may as well be doing the whole road at that point, because your cost savings aren't going to be there when you throw away the facilities later to build your road.
Are you saying that the incremental cost between the motorized improvements and the non-motorized improvements is small?
Relatively speaking, yes, between the two of them. The non-motorized is probably going to be 2/3 of the cost of your total road project. And then the road's estimated about 6.4 now in future years, 6.4 million.
So the non-motorized is 2/3 of the total
Yeah, 'cause
cost?
you've got drainage, curb and gutter, you've got some wide facilities, you've got some bicycle facilities, you've got that are slated for this. It's not just two sidewalks. Because right now what you have is you do have actually two sidewalks, but they're flat with the grade. You can't tell that they're really there. So people park on them and the gravel gets on them and things like that. They're not very usable. So it's an unfriendly place for pedestrians.
So anyhow, that's why I asked what number 17 actually was when it says
Yeah,
elevated.
and number 17 on the TAP for the 2014 and 19, that's just the number on the left-hand side column that annotates the project, and that is actually the East Sunset Way improvements. Number 10 is a project that Councilmember Milligan was speaking to swap it out with, which was the intersection improvements at Issaquah Falls City and Pine Lake Road, Issaquah Pine Lake Road. And so the idea was, hopefully, that because of the Kalahani agreement, there was belief that we didn't have to do those improvements anymore, but no, they're still in our city limits. We still need to do those improvements, and there still are requirements under the Kalahani ILA. So,
Okay, so I just fundamentally, I just want to make sure that this goal, it's really critical compared to some of our other transportation pieces, that the non-motorized portion is like a huge part of why this is appealing, right? There's some improvements that we need to do that are primarily car-based, and certainly it would be nice not to have as many backups on at Second as there are, but we can get through. But the non-motorized part is the heart of this goal, and if we went and did this and didn't do the non-motorized piece, then we really would have missed, I think, the point of this goal. But I've talked enough.
Thank you. Eileen? Okay, thank you.
For me?
Yeah.
I didn't have anything right now either.
Okay, over to me. Keith, your smart art graphics using the vertical bending process, so you're putting it to very creative use. I appreciate it. I really, I'm in the same place. It's connected with Old Town. It's important. Mentally, with traffic, I'm at a different place, or transportation in general, I'm kind of at a different place. And so I'm going to hold back further comments about this specifically, because I really want to talk about all of the traffic goals here and see if I can get more clarity. Because I feel like if I speak about one particular project, it'll be better balanced once we talk about all the traffic goals that are here. This was yours, Nina, so I'm going to skip you and go over. And I think we started with Tola, right? Mm-hmm. So, Stacy, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I feel similarly. I'd like to, we've got the other transportation one to go, and we're going to, I'm sure, have some pretty interesting conversations on Saturday. But I would like to thank Nina for pointing out the obvious. It is one of those places that we kind of get used to, and some newer, somebody with something new to the process. Oh, well, yeah, but sitting here and talking about it, you see something that we kind of gotten used to, and I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Okay. Any other comments, Nina? Sure.
And I think this question's for Sheldon, and I should have asked it of you the other day. And so if you wanted to come back to me on Saturday, if this is too complicated, how does a project the number 17 on the list, down in what I think of as purgatory, it's got a dollar value, but it's not up in an actionable, how do they move up the list? How do they become?
Council can move them up the list. Those are really not priority items. Those are reference items. It says priority in the column, but really the prioritization comes when the council decides what they want to fund and implement at the end of the day.
Process.
It's a budget process.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then I just want to add, I really appreciate Keith's diagram, and that there is a transportation part, but to summarize this as a transportation element, I think would be doing it a disservice, because not only is it, and aptly called gateway, but it's also front door. This is the front door to our city from anybody who gets off the freeway at exit 18 coming either direction. And the front door not only provides a means to get somewhere else, but it is a thing, and that's why I'm excited to talk with you more about it. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right. So now we'll move on to item number 14, Transportation Master Plan.
All right.
There he is.
I've
Looking for you up
arrived.
there. Hi, Charlie.
The Transportation Master Plan. So this is taking a look at the update of our comprehensive plan and work we would be doing on the transportation element that we are planning to do, and essentially creating an action-oriented implementation plan for making the city's role proactive rather than reactionary. And this would be a comprehensive multimodal approach and identify near and long-term specific actions and funding plans. So one example cited here is Redmond's Transportation Master Plan, and also some other citations were the Comprehensive Plan, the Economic Vitality Strategic Plan, and the Issaquah Vision Statement. There were some action items that involved the use of consultants. Moving on to the staff response, we took a similar approach to what we did on affordable housing, which is we talked about what was existing first and what was in the works second, and then what we would propose to do beyond that. So what's existing right now, we have a comprehensive plan with a transportation element, and so we talk a little bit about that, and our plans for our update, which will be complete by the middle of 2015, where we will be rolling in a number of things, including the Central Issaquah Plan and our Mobility Action Plan, which is our pedestrian and bicycle plan that we've been working on, and updated transportation concurrency, which the council funded last week, and we've begun work on, and we'll be talking with you the rest of the year. Talked here a little bit about the Central Issaquah Plan and the connectivity and mobility element of that, in terms of parking and the grid system and a variety of things that are in that plan. We referenced our Transportation Improvement Program, which was just mentioned in the prior item, and that's a 20-year list of automotive, pedestrian, and bicycle-oriented projects, and includes our Complete Streets program, which was referenced earlier. We also have an internal transportation committee. This is a committee that formed a couple of years ago and works on a whole variety of transportation policy items and information sharing across departments, and is partly responsible for the mobility action plan that you'll be seeing in the near future. So in terms of in the works, we have the mobility action plan, which I've referenced. Again, that's our pedestrian and bicycle plan, which brings a whole variety of plans together that are already in existence, and then looks at some connectivity between those for pedestrians and bicycles. And we are also working, as a result of the Central Issaquah planning efforts, on their urban center designation, which the council took action on recently, and then moving on to the Puget Sound Regional Council with a regional growth center application that's in process and expected to be completed by the end of this year. Our comprehensive plan update, again, is through the middle of next year, and we're working on concurrency. So those are all things that are in process right now, and our impact fee update as well. What's absent? So we took a look at the Redmond plan and said, what aren't we doing? And we listed those things off: a parking plan, a formalized maintenance and operations program, although there is a reference to that in what you'll see in the mobility action plan, at least for those items. A short-term action priority plan, a transportation demand management program update, and a detailed street, non-motorized, and transit design guidance, so additional guidance in those areas. So what we did is we laid out two options. The first option would be what I would call the transportation element plus, and the second is like the transportation element plus plus. It's beyond. It's much beyond, in fact. The first option essentially finishes the work that we talked about and puts us into more of an action mode. But it assumes existing policies, so we're carrying those policies forward as we're building on additional pieces. The second option looks at revisiting policies entirely, and so that's why it takes longer, because we're going to challenge some of the assumptions that we already have, and there's much more public process included in that. So we created a table going on to the next page, and that has both options laid out. And you will see, again, option one with significantly fewer bullets, although both of these are action-oriented. Option two has a lot of additional work in those gaps that I mentioned, and again, more public process. And at the bottom of this, there are some estimated costs and time frames: $100,000 to $200,000 for the first option, looking at a 3-year time frame, and up to 5 years on the second option at $400,000. And then Sheldon and I, we've been revising these numbers a little bit this evening as well. We're talking about the interplay between this particular transportation master plan and the Old Town circulation plan. And the numbers down there say 250 to 350. We're going to revise that to 250 to 500 at the bottom, and up to 600,000 on option 2. And the reason for that is there is some overlap. We continue to discuss exactly where the overlap is in these projects, but it isn't quite as much as we had assumed in our initial response. So we do propose some significant consultant work in our efforts under either option. And that is the presentation on the Transportation Master Plan.
All right, thank you. And Eileen, we'll start with you. Your comments, questions?
Probably more questions. I'm not even sure quite where to start. I think there is some great proposed ideas in here. the idea that there's an action plan implementation for making the city's role proactive, thank you, rather than reactionary. And it seems like that's where we've been for such a long time, is you always sort of react to an issue or a problem that's coming up, as opposed to being more proactive to it. I guess I'm not sure at this moment, Paul. I've got some questions, but I just need to understand this more to probably have some real honest, educated comments. Either way, I know there's some work that we need to be doing in town, so I need to just review a bit more.
Okay, Mary Lou?
I really like this goal because it seems to me like it's taken that 60,000-foot view. And so this one, I think, is a really good big picture thing to do. The only thing I'm a little concerned about, and maybe I'll flesh this out more on Saturday, is that I want to do this transportation master plan, but I don't want to lose the fact that we've also identified at least 2 other areas in town right now that we want to see some action and thought put into the circulation plan for Old Town and East Sunset Way. And I would throw another one in there, which is we have a lot of public input also about sidewalk trail connections on Westlake Sammamish. So I'm very excited about the big picture view, but I don't want to lose these maybe more specific goals where we're talking about certain areas. So we'll hear more on Saturday, I guess, how this all works together.
Okay, I was one of the sponsors, so I'll pass through over to Nina, excuse me.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Those good comments, and also it's apropos to recognize the requests of the Westlake Sammamish area too for this sort of thing. Okay, what I wanted to understand better was any difference in as the staff response, which is an awesome response, how it changes your intention when you wanted to change the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, and then they're talking about a mobility master plan. And were you guys talking about something to get done in the 2015 update to the comp plan, and then does this turn this into something altogether different? That's kind of where I'm wondering.
So I'll take a swing at that. The comprehensive plan, the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, and I think it's stated clearly in the goal as well. This is not that. It's that end. It's the comprehensive plan is a plan, right? But it in itself isn't actionable. It in itself doesn't have timing and funding alternatives and a strategy and what to do over the next 10 years. You know, it's a plan. And so, but it's an essential part of the overall master plan. So I don't know if that helps, but so this wasn't guidance, intended to be guidance on how to do the transportation element of the comprehensive plan update. It was, we know we need to do that, but this was incorporating that into a master plan, which would have an actual action, not so much completing the activities, but action in terms of making investments and doing things in the city regarding transportation. Does that help?
I think so. I think what you're stating is a confidence that the response is responding to your wish.
Well, I have some other comments I'm going to make. I'll wait till
Okay,
everybody
I'll
else
look forward to
comments.
I look forward to those. And then I think that's all I have for right now. That this is a lot to digest, and I'm looking forward to the conversation later.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
And trying to bring it in with the other goals and not leaving it sit by itself.
Okay, thank you. Tola?
I guess I want to make sure I understand. When we did the Central Issaquah plan, we identified a number of potential capital costs associated with increased development in the valley floor. Is this to sort of apply that same understanding of potential capital costs citywide? How does this compare to the inventory that we have on hand for the CIP?
So if you don't mind, I'll take a swing at that. Stacy, did you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, CIP is just one part of the city. And the CIP is a plan. And it's not, it doesn't prescribe to do certain projects in certain order, and here's a strategy for how to fund them.
Well, as part of the CIP, we had to make an assessment of whether we thought that development in the valley would, or could, I should say, more accurately, fund the infrastructure that would be needed. But I think you've answered my question, which is this is sort of a, well, you don't agree with the characterization of what we have on the CIP, but at some level, it's creating an inventory citywide, somewhat like the inventory that we have for the CIP, but then it's also the timing and sequencing of those capital resources.
That's the way I view it. I mean, again, I have some more comments to augment that further. Would you agree, Stacy?
I would agree with that. It's much more comprehensive than anything we have, which we would propose includes action, short-term priorities.
All right, that answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Stacy, you haven't had a chance to speak at all, so I'll kick it over to you next. I've had my chance at the mic, but I do have more to say.
I was focused on listening. So I have a couple questions. Charlie, you mentioned, sorry, what am I talking about? You mentioned that the option 1 is more action-oriented.
Both options are action-oriented. The second option involves more process. So in the second option, we're adding additional elements, and we're also involving not only the public in a more comprehensive way. The first option looks at just a standard public outreach, whereas the second is going to involve additional public outreach meetings and a variety of other things. So it's a much larger process in terms of outreach, and it also revisits a lot of the policy, not a lot, but some of the policy assumptions, certainly in some of our existing documentation. So option 1 would carry forward a lot of what's already existing and bring that together into some synthesis. Option 2 starts to really look at fundamental questions of do we want to revisit certain things that we've already planned.
Okay. And regarding the costs, you mentioned a little bit revising the cost estimates a little bit. And was a consultant consulted on what the
Yes.
What the cost would be?
We did outreach to one consulting firm briefly. We had to respond pretty quickly, and certainly these costs would get refined as we got closer to budget time, but we did do some outreach.
Okay, thanks.
So, again, I realize we're not deliberating this, just for kind of clarity. So, when I read the response, my thought was maybe we should have defined action plan a little bit more clearly, because I see in the staff response that there's action in there, but the action I was thinking of was, doing projects. And so I see the staff response looks like completing work we already know we're going to do. And my vision for this goal was above and beyond, was okay, that and the other thing, and one thing that's I would discuss more on Saturday is because I haven't been part of yet, as long as I've been on the council, actually conversations about the funding options. I appreciate your mention when we did look at costs associated with the CIP, right, and kind of how maybe that could be done. And I think there are other tools, and maybe that exist now and maybe don't exist. So in my mind, one of the tools that we have available to us right now is a transportation benefit district, for example. And I vision this goal to be a conversation about that. We also know that there are other proposed tools for transportation funding that don't exist yet in state law, but to me, then this conversation could then also lead toward, hey, a strategy for us to perhaps add to our legislative agenda to really try to push for and try to get like a local transportation option in a state-funded transportation plan. So that's why. So the funding part in that isn't really developed very well in here. And I thought that the action plan was around projects, to oversimplify it, and options on how we could accomplish those. And because I think this is the citizen comments that we've got, a significant portion are affirming that transportation is critical and needs improvement. And I think the motivation for this goal is to really elevate this, and as a community to perhaps ask ourselves, how far are we willing to go to actually now take action and do something. And so hopefully that's helpful to my other colleagues on the council. That gives you any more insight into my thinking behind the goal. But again, I wasn't the only author, so.
Just something to offer on the funding options portion.
Sure.
The work that you authorized us to begin on concurrency last week included an analysis of funding options for transportation in particular, also for parks. And so we will be having that discussion this fall. So you'll at least get a good sense for what's out there and what it might mean to the community in terms of funding opportunities.
And thank you for that reminder. But is that really concurrency? I do remember.
It's going to be related to
I remember when we presented it here in my room. My comment was, that sounds like a master plan. But
you'll see concurrency in this response and the impact fee work. So it is related to impact.
So your reference of concurrency in here is the full scope of that project we just allocated for earlier in the last week. Okay.
So part of this process this evening is to help us develop mutual understanding of what you wanted. So if there was further refinement of the goal that the sponsors wanted, we still have some time before Saturday to spend a little bit more time refining that and then getting that information out to you before Saturday. So if there's something more specific, and I kind of heard you saying that you'd like from the staff, we could maybe better understand that tonight, and then we can spend a little more time putting that work together next couple days.
Whenever you're ready, Stacy. You have any comments?
I think
you already had comments. Never mind.
one of the things that went through my mind when I was working on this goal and when I read the response is about a little bit about quantity versus quality. And we have a lot of good things going on, but we're also hearing from our community, as we all know, and we can't deny that, as Paul said, transportation is, if not the number one issue, and has been for many, 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 many years, it's tied with concerns about development and related issues. And so I think that at least one of my motivations for this was to sort of finally make a significant difference in the way we go about tackling transportation issues in our community. And which is one of the reasons that when I looked at the Redmond plan, I appreciated the comprehensiveness of it, and that it had short-term action items and funding, funding in it, and it just seemed to be, as was mentioned before, just a very, very large step above what we're doing in our community.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? So Charlie, if you have questions for us, maybe I think we should move on the agenda. We still have 3 more goals, and if we need to circle back, we'll do that. All right, thank you. So then the next goal is, Charlie, you're up again on number 15, increasing multimodal options.
Yeah, this was a much shorter response, so hopefully that'll help. So essentially the goal of this was to take a look at, in particular, in light of transit reductions, but even in the absence of transit reductions, circulation within the community, whether it's rideshare or other options, busing, a whole variety of possibilities within this goal. There are references to the comprehensive plan, the economic vitality task force, and the city's vision statement. And really the layout of this is looking at an analysis in 2015, looking at various options, and then possibly 2016, 2017 implementation to try to reduce reliance on single occupancy vehicles, and also looking at partnerships in that implementation. The staff response recaps some of the work that we've been doing. We've been, of course, anticipating the Metro transit cuts that have been proposed for about the last year, and there have been efforts in the legislature and as recently Proposition 1 at the county level to form a transportation benefit district, actually add revenue to a transportation benefit district, which was unsuccessful. And there are still active discussions going on right now about Seattle possibly forming, running their own election and possible partnerships with surrounding cities to fund some of the regional bus routes. So there's a whole variety of stuff going on there that we've been tracking. And we are prepared, and we've been prepared for a while now, and because circumstances keep changing, we keep pushing back a little bit. We're trying to figure out where the actionable point is going to be in all of this. But we're prepared to, we introduced an agenda bill last year, and we're ready to come back to the infrastructure committee of the council to continue discussion to look at, in particular, Route 200. We've been focused a lot on Route 200 and looking at the ridership of Route 200, doing some outreach to the community and in particular our human services agencies who certainly have significant ridership on Route 200 and looking at options that we may be able to implement to try to provide the mobility that will go away for those folks once Route 200 goes away, and in all likelihood it will. It's very, very likely at this point. So we've been looking at that, but we certainly have more analysis that we've done as well, looking at other options. There are a whole variety of things that we could look at doing. It's going to require investment ultimately, or some very creative partnerships. And we do have farebox money that's in Route 200 that we may be able to use to try to implement something. And so basically, the staff response is that this analysis is underway. We're ready to come back and talk with the infrastructure committee and look at what options may be available, and then to move forward in 2015 or 2016, potentially, if the council supports some kind of action with starting to address some of these issues, particularly with circulation in the community. The regional routes are a little bit beyond our touch at this point in time, just given the amount of money involved. And even Route 200 is well over $1 million a year to operate the way it currently is set up. Significant money.
Okay, thank you. Mary Lou.
I didn't really have much in the way of comments or questions on this one. I thought Josh did a good job writing it up, and I was excited to hear that staff was already working on it. So more information on Saturday.
Yeah, your comment about learning staff is already working on it. Yeah, this is one where I really wish. It's unfortunate Josh isn't here. We would have a little bit more opportunity to get his reaction and maybe comments about the staff response. Yeah, I don't have more to say. I'm very uncertain. Yeah, I'm kind of uncertain because this may fall in for me in one of those areas where maybe just more visibility and knowing, and and maybe those who are on the infrastructure committee knew that this type of work was already going on. I don't know, and maybe it's visibility to the rest of us, but. This may be one of those goals that is being addressed. Nina?
Thank you. One question I had, he doesn't say it directly except that he does talk about rideshare programs, and I know that Josh has expressed interest in the sort of innovative organic solutions that have arisen in other jurisdictions. And I don't see really in the staff response if there's a way that we could be more proactive about those rather than reactive, and if that might be part of the solution.
Yeah, we anticipate that'll be a part of the discussion when we come back. So there are some opportunities and options out there. That's part of whatever in there.
Thank you, Stacy.
I don't have anything.
No comments. Tola?
I wish I understood in a more deterministic fashion when we wind up needing consultants and when we don't. Because I look at this one and it says, if council seeks a significant community process to address this goal, then 100,000 in consulting assistance would be needed. I would think that if you needed consulting assistance on something like this, you would certainly want consulting assistance on an Old Town outreach effort. So I mean, I say it a little facetiously, but I think it's true that it's not always obvious to me when we think we need to engage consultants and when we don't on various issues, which I realize is entirely beyond just this issue. But this one stuck out at me because I heard that we don't have money for having a facilitator for Old Town, but we would need 100,000 for this one.
I think part of that would be depending upon whether we have staff or not. So we have actually an economic development manager that spends a lot of time on business retention, and a lot of her efforts is spent on Old Town versus, in this case, we don't have existing staff for that. So we would typically buy in a resource for that.
Well, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
This effort is literally done by committee across departments. So all of us do our best to keep it moving.
Okay. Eileen? No comments. All right. Any final comments from anybody? Okay, very good. Thank you, Charlie. Number 16, the penultimate goal of the evening, mobility action steps now.
This goal was proposed by Councilmember Scher, and just to reiterate his description of the goal was to commence in-house efforts towards overcrossing and Front Street interchange improvements. For example, begin assessments of options, encourage public support for the IJR, discuss with property owners, and prepare a timeline. In paraphrasing why his goal essentially...
Sheldon?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I may. I know we get into acronyms sometimes, and so an IJR is...
Interchange Justification Report.
And why is that typically needed?
The interchange justification report is typically needed anytime you do a modification to access points on the main line of interstate systems, or you cross through the interchange areas and things like that. The FHWA requires a substantial effort in studying the impacts of that and what are the alternatives for doing it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. So to paraphrase real roughly why this goal, essentially what Councilmember Scher is recommending is that, doing some local work in advance of the interchange justification report funding towards the design options locally. And so in reviewing this, essentially the 12th Avenue overcrossing with direct access ramps to I-90 is directly tied and incorporated within the IJR, the Interchange Justification Report for the Front Street interchange. This is because the on and off ramps and interchange reconfigurations at Front Street will likely impact how the direct access ramps are located on the main line for the 12th Avenue overcrossing. And so it's really difficult to separate the two, virtually impossible, because once you start doing studies for the overcrossing and the like, you're going to involve FHWA, WashDOT, and you're going to get into a lot of technical studies and public input in that process. And so your costs are going to be upwards of what the IJR is going to cost the state, because the IJR is a state responsibility. And so what we've been doing last year and plan to do until the money comes available essentially is to work through the legislative agenda to ensure that we're lobbying at the state to get the money to do the IJR for Front Street, which would incorporate this crossing.
Okay, thank you. We'll get to you, Dola.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking it's like a regular meeting.
Very
Never mind.
excited about this.
I was just excited.
So, I'm going to admit right up front, I should have sent somebody an email or made a phone call and said, "Tell me about IJR," because that actually fills in a lot of gaps for me. and I think what I just heard from you, and though and Councilmember shares the way he's written it, I mean, there's the yeah, part of his description is discuss with property owners, for example, and prepare a timeline. I think I just heard you say that if the state does an IJR, I was going to actually try interchange justification report,
Yes.
then that's really step one. Any kind of community conversation, well, I'm being presumptive here, but anything else would be premature until there's actually an IJR, and it's just a report, is all that it is.
It's a very thorough study. They used to call them the 6-point access studies, and I think that's gone up to 8-point access studies now. But essentially, FHWA, because of the safety issues and movement of traffic along the main line, they have to make sure that there's safe distances between the access points and things like that, and how all that's addressed if it's closer. And that will essentially, as a result of the IJR, almost dictate the exact location for your 12th Avenue overcrossing, because FHWA is going to tell you, you can put it here, you can't put it over here, as part of that IJR. So yeah, the IJR is step one.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, I will also admit that the title of Mobility Action Steps now kind of threw me a little bit. This is really a goal about an overcrossing. And is that how you interpreted it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I know.
Is there an additional step that needs to be taken to have the 12th Avenue overcrossing part of the IJR?
No, it's planned as part of the scope right now.
Right now, it's already in there.
Yeah, that's what we're lobbying for, is to have the IJR incorporate both Front Street interchange and the 12th Avenue overcrossing / direct access ramps incorporated together.
All right. Thank you, Nina. Stacy?
Well, that was my question as well. Would it necessarily include that? And you answered my question. My concern about the goal would be what you implied. I don't know that you actually said it, but I think it was fairly clear that it would be duplicative, costly efforts.
Okay. Thank you. Tola?
I just want to understand the statement that 12th Avenue overcrossing, the design of it would be coupled to Front Street interchange redo, because it looks like it's essentially right on top of the I-900 interchange, and it's at least a mile from where it would overcross is at least a mile from where the on-ramps off of the Front Street interchange get onto I-90. So it doesn't seem like it would automatically follow that it would be coupled.
Well, the I-90 corridor study identified a complete reconstruction of the Front Street interchange. It had a couple of different design alternatives for that interchange, but yet until those design alternatives are refined and you start dealing with weaving and things like that along the main line, the direct access ramps off the 12th Avenue overcrossing may actually get close to overlapping with the on and off ramps of the Front Street interchange at the end of the day.
Even though it's a mile away.
Yeah, I mean, an example of that is the Sunset interchange and Front Street interchange. It's a little over a mile away, but if you notice that you can't get on at Front Street and get on and go up to Issaquah Highlands,
right.
And that's specifically as a result of the interchange justification report that was done for that interchange.
All right.
It's a safety issue.
Thank you.
Eileen?
Well, understanding once you commented in regards to the fact that this IJR is going to help us with the design for Front Street exchange, it'll be interesting then to see how and what they have to say in regards to the 12th Avenue, where its location is and what impact it has between the then additional on and off ramp that we would have, and if there would be value to it. Would that
It'll involve essentially placing the 12th Avenue overcrossing in a geographical reference area so that we can evaluate the impacts on the north and south side as well, not just in the mainline area, but the IJR will probably only address the impacts on the main line, and we'll have to deal with additional study work to deal with the north and south side of I-90, depending on where it sits.
And in order to move forward with Front Street, we would have had to have done this IJR. So this is probably a little bit additional in cost now running the two of them, or is it going to double in cost?
So this is all incorporated in the same IGR. So
Okay.
I think, especially if there was a high occupancy vehicle lanes and how that may impact on Front Street, this was part of the draft I-90 corridors, or the final corridor study.
It was in the final quarter.
Yeah, so, and you may recall, we've been lobbying as part of our efforts in the state transportation budget to include the funding for this, and it hasn't made it in any of the drafts, unfortunately, but it's still a major priority in the council legislative
Yeah.
agenda.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Mary Lou?
It's unfortunate Josh isn't here tonight, because I would really like to see him interact with Sheldon on hashing out some of his own questions about it. But my sense when I read this was that, sometimes the city, we own the issue, it's our responsibility, we drive it, we pay for it. And in other cases, we have to wait for other jurisdictions to get the other jobs done. And this is one that the state is really at the state level, and the city's already got these efforts in lobbying to try and make it move. So I'm not really sure that this goal meets the standard of being a goal that we can actually act upon. And I have more conversation with Josh on that on Saturday, because he may, have different kinds of questions and comments for Sheldon. So for me, this is one that we may be able to influence the outcome, but it's just not one that the city itself is going to be actionable on.
Okay, thank you. I have an additional comment to make, and the others as well. You said it very well. In thinking about this now, I mean, in a way, this goal could be to just affirm our legislative agenda to make the IJR funded by the state a priority. And because now I've learned in this process, we can't move forward. Let's say, for instance, we do something like this master plan that was discussed, and this was on there, and it was a high priority, and step number one would be, well, when we get an IJR, we can go to step number 2. Did I say that? I mean, is that
I think so, yeah.
characterization accurate? Okay, thank you for the clarification. Any other comments? Okay, thank you, Sheldon. That was very helpful. And then the last goal to review is number 17, transportation innovation, and Sheldon, you're up again.
I'm up again. This draft goal also was presented by Councilmember Scher, and as I did the last one, I'm going to read the description a little bit. It was to explore innovative traffic management, mobility, and pedestrian bike safety ideas, such as countdown traffic lights at busy intersections, better/more prevalent crosswalk illumination, funding more flashing yellow lights, etc., for the 2016/17 budget implementations. And essentially, this is a draft that appears to be recommending specific types of ideas for improvements associated with non-motorized mobility through the city. As you recall, last year there was a draft goal regarding flashing yellow arrows, and this year we were able to install 7 flashing yellow arrow signal heads. They're still under construction now, but they should be done by fall. There are 11 intersections remaining that flashing yellow arrows would be appropriate for, and I'll talk about costs in a little bit because I have some clarifications on that. And I'm not going to go through each one of the intersections here. Also in 2013-14, the city completed a public process to develop its bicycle pedestrian mobility action plan that encouraged the identification of innovative ideas. And I think you heard about that in some of the other presentations tonight. And a note to make there, funding is a critical part of being able to implement any mobility type project ideas. In 2014, in accordance with the Central Issaquah C&M Policy G1, the administration is working with the council to develop an impact fee for non-motorized elements. So there is a part to that concurrency discussion that's the council just recently authorized that's going to have a non-motorized fee associated with it. So hopefully these projects that are in that PED Mobility Action Plan will start to get implemented as well as those fees get collected. And then regarding the crosswalks, our standard crosswalks require the markings to be white reflective stripings with warning signs for motorists or at intersections that have stop controls or signals. Essentially, on a case-by-case basis, we recommend evaluating crosswalks for illumination and things like that because those would be special treatments. And to put them where they're not necessarily warranted doesn't make a lot of sense, but where they are warranted, it absolutely does make sense. And we've done that in the past, increased illuminations and things of that sort. So,
The only supplement would make would be, we talked about during the budget process last year, trying to do all those flashing yellow arrows over a 3-year funding window. So we did the first 6, and then I think Sheldon identified a cost on here. So our plan would have been to include half or so this year and half the remaining year.
I appreciate you bringing it up because I forgot to clarify the cost language in here, and it's not the cost language is not very clear, and so I feel the need to clarify it. 8 of the 11 intersections we could do for about $110,000. The other 3 need further evaluation, and depending upon the impacts to the mast arms and signal pole foundations and things like that, due to additional loading criteria, those could be around $100,000 each. So those could be pricey, but at least 8 of them could fit within the 110. So I wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
So Nina, let's start with you.
Well, I keep asking this question because I'm in disbelief. Did you just say that 8 intersections could be funded altogether for 110? The estimate, and the others would be 100 apiece?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to write that down. That's my only.
Okay, thank you. Stacy?
Well, as Josh is known to do, he has used the word innovation again, which I appreciate, and I know I'm not the only one on the council that appreciates that. Looking at the action items that are proposed, I think really the purpose of the action items I think of as a to-do list. So if you get up on Saturday and you decide that you want to clean up the yard, what do I need, how do I know when I'm done? So you make a list, and it's a to-do list, and once you've got all those things checked off, you know you're done. And this one has 2 steps. It's utilize staff knowledge, research, and public input to develop innovative ideas, and there's more. And then in number 2, to reassess the status of the efforts. Not sure those are sort of measurable. I don't know when we know we've utilized staff knowledge. So I have a little bit of concern about that. What strikes me is maybe it starts with a conversation with infrastructure about how we go about trying to be innovative, what we're doing. But again, I do appreciate the word innovative. I like that.
Thank you. Tolan?
I guess my only question would be, there's some examples here of potential innovation. And is there, in the engineering world, we have standards and they change over time. Are there evolving standards to which the city can look for not reinventing the wheel? In other words, that the industry, if you will, or the I don't know the right way to put it, but that there would be some of these innovations that would be coming out that would already be well understood in terms of the return on investment?
Yes, the standards do evolve over time. A classic example of it is the countdown lights for ped heads. And actually, the countdown lights for ped heads coinciding with the ADA transition study, with the voice activate or the voice heads. we already have a list of those. As we do work on the signals and everything, we're going to have to upgrade to ADA. It's all within the ADA transition study. So those are things that are already in the works, and we do that all the time. Yep. We follow the standards.
So can any of those evolving standards help point us towards which innovations have already been sort of tried and true? And I realize that's in
They
some ways.
typically do, but I think we're always looking for new and better ways to do things. So.
All right.
Thank you. Eileen? No comment? Mary Lou?
Just a couple of quick thoughts. Is when I read this one, the way Josh wrote it, I like the word innovation as well. But when I got through the staff response, it feels to me like we're doing a lot of what Josh asked already in this goal. And so I'd like to hear him interact with you on Saturday and find out what it is that we're not currently doing, because he wrote this for a reason, but I'm not completely understanding it. It feels to me like some of these things are current work plan items for the infrastructure committee, so I'm not sure how much further he wanted to go. So I'm a little confused about this one.
Okay, thank you. Plus one, I agree with that, and especially the staff response I think was very illuminating. And so to me, it's like in that category of the kind of the green building. We're doing quite a bit. We've got a commitment. We've got work that's done. We're in the middle of some plans, and things are going on. And my sense is we've got as a priority and how it's funded, and we still have funding questions in front of us. I mean, I'm kind of okay where we are right now. So that's my comment. So we've been all the way around. Does anybody have any final comments on this issue? Okay, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Not this issue, no, something
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So we're done with the first agenda item for tonight. 47 minutes longer than we thought. And still have a captive audience. It's always a really good sign when almost nobody leaves your presentation. I mean, they're just waiting for the end. But Bob, you're next. And before we start, however, I'm going to look around the room, and if a break, a 5-minute break may be necessary before we get started again. So everybody look at the clock with me. It currently says 9, roughly 18. So when the big hand, 5 minutes from now, when the big hand is on the 23 after, we'll start again. Ready? Okay, we're back on the air. Okay, that ran over just a little bit. Okay, now on to the second part. Bob, the show's all yours. Are you going to stay down here, or do you have a presentation?
I have a presentation.
Okay.
I'm going to stay here and up and around. We'll see how it goes. I got the controller here. Yeah. So one of the things that we've been discussing with council leadership and the mayor, as well as the senior leadership team, and want to discuss with all of you tonight, is the fact that council goals are really more than just a single year process. So many of these items, sometimes they can be done in a single year, but many of these things, many of these goals take multiple years either to set up a program, or once we do set up a program, they have ongoing costs on a regularized basis, that have to be worked into the operating budget, or even if there's some type of capital investment, sometimes those come along with operating, some operating requirements. And so what we wanted to do was take a look at the last 3 years as a window. So the 2013 goals, 2014 goals, and then the proposed 2015 goals, and give you a status update on where they are. And we've been doing that in the past. And then to kind of just give a conceptual aspect of, is there an end date to some of these goals, or what's happened, or is there a continuation? Because we may want to have some consideration of a goal that the council may have previously adopted, and we may want to reconsider that on Saturday because, as we talked a little bit about earlier, there's opportunity costs. So if we wanted to incorporate a goal for 2015, we may not have the existing staffing or funding to make those happen. And so one of the opportunities would be, looking at the existing programs or goals that council has previously put in place and making a determination as to whether or not we want those to continue. So we'll go through that as of May 12, 2014. And again, I wanted to call out the whole senior leadership team for assisting in bringing this up to date, and in particular, Autumn for putting together the Prezi presentation that you'll see here tonight. Okay, these were the goals that we identified in 2013, and you'll see there's 11 boxes. And the things that we got done was completing the Klahani annexation study. The council hired a lobbyist in that year, and we began to televise council budget meetings that occurred last year. One of the decisions that was made in that budget cycle was not to fund fireworks on an ongoing basis, but there was some reaffirmation that if someone wanted to get a private permit to do fireworks, that we would allow that under the law, and there's a process through our special permits function that an HOA or an individual can do a fireworks show if they chose to do that on a private basis. One of the goals was to relocate the skate park, and at this point, the Tibbetts Park location was recommended. That's on schedule with the completion of that park in spring 2015, assuming, and that still has to go through council review on the location and eventual adoption. But if that was adopted, the cost was estimated at $350,000 to complete the capital costs, and there's an ongoing operating cost of about $5,000 a year. The IPZ SWOT analysis was identified as a goal, and the SWOT was completed by the EVC with the goal of developing the strategic plan in 2014. One of the things that had been put into the budget for consideration was a sector analysis. We've talked about that before at previous meetings. That was not funded last year.
Can you remind me what zone, what kind of zone?
Innovative partnership.
Thank you.
And so that's a designation under state statute that the city could pursue if it so chose. But there's some actual work and study that has to be done before you can submit the application, and that's on a biennium basis in terms of when you can submit those applications. So we can submit one in 2015, or the next one after that would be 2017. but it's really going to be dependent upon when the sector analysis is completed, when we'll be able to hit that date. Front Street intersections, we spent a lot of time talking about that earlier, and we're currently lobbying for that acronym, the Interchange Justification Report. The Bike and Ped Plan, we have a draft completed by the Office of Sustainability that has been circulated through all the various departments for comments. OS has received those comments back, and they're going ahead and making the final modifications and edits to that plan. And I think that it's their intent to present that plan to the City Council by mid-year. One of the things that was identified were several priority projects, which are approximately $18 million in cost for infrastructure improvements to get that done. Five-star city, and with the election of the sponsor of that goal to the position of mayor in the city, he and frankly the rest of the employees and the staff are employing that philosophy every day in service delivery. So it's a frame of mind and a frame of conceptual aspect of service. So we're working hard in doing that. Lake Sammamish State Park, a memorandum of understanding was executed between the City of Issaquah and State Parks in 2012. We anticipate a annexation to come before council in June 2014. We've pretty much got most of our work done affiliated with that. We did meet with State Parks last week to discuss kind of an overall comprehensive agreement on 4 or 5 items like policing of the park, how dispatch calls would be handled in the park, those types of things. So we want to kind of finalize that before we proceed with the final annexation. Also, in conjunction with the Economic Development Department, a request for concept proposals was submitted to state parks, and we've reviewed those. We've had some initial analysis done of those, and there was a proposal put forth to state parks on kind of evaluating the viability of those concepts. We also discussed a potential planned action ordinance that would deal with some of the environmental issues that may come forth in as it relates to some of the development concept proposals that were put forward. Regional designation application was made to GMPC and the PSRC, and we expect that approval by the end of 2014. Public lands inventory, the staff has completed the inventory, and the Economic Development Department will be presenting that to the Land and Shore Committee in June 2014. And if there's any recommendations for the reuse or potential sale of that land, we'll have that recommendation at that time. Rainier Trail, there's primarily been a focus on maintenance and safety patrols. It's been a multi-departmental effort. The police department is really focused on, police at full-time equivalent in terms of regularized maintenance and safety patrols in that area, and half of a park's full-time equivalency in, cleanup and that type of thing in that area.
Can I ask you a question, Paul? Can we take questions?
Yes, Stola.
Thanks. Just on that previous one, you said there's 1 FTE equivalent of patrolling. So we have 28 uniformed officers. How many?
So, Chief Beerbaum, if you want to come up here and answer.
34.
That's 34. The chief on down on patrol there is currently.
Uniformed police is 34 from the chief on down, but on patrol there's currently 22 officers assigned to the patrol division. And then, of course, we have a traffic unit and a school resource officer. And the 1 FTE is based off of calls for service and multiple officer response to patrols and for incidents in that area.
So 5% of all of our incidents in the city, roughly, are coming from Rainier Trail.
Well, 1 out of 22, so a little less than 5%. Well, and also proactive patrols to address that issue.
But roughly 4 or 5% of our entire patrol effort is going into Rainier Trail currently. All right, thanks.
Another question? Go ahead, Mary Lou.
In a lot of these, Bob, the question is probably for the police chief, but in a lot of these, is there a measurement? Like, we've committed those resources and we saw a 20% decrease in crime, or do we have a measurement for that one?
Based off of past instances of if we apply resources, you're actually going to see sometimes increase is in crimes and calls for service because you're either locating and then you're also charging them. So to have an exact idea of we've seen a reduction, we've actually seen an increase of calls for service because of focused police patrol efforts and, of course, increased crimes resulting on some of those.
All right. Thank you. Bob, you can continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Financial information in agenda bills, and there had been a request by the council to see a little more consistency in terms of how financial information was presented in that. There's some review that's done by the finance director on those agenda bills to make sure there's consistency across the staff in terms of the information presented. And I think that was kind of the focus was depending upon the director that was filling in the information in that agenda bill, it may not always have a standardized process in terms of information that was presented. Okay, 2014. Any questions on 2013 at all? All right. So there were 2 goals that were included that were not funded in the budget. So you may recall as part of this, there's really a 2-step process for council goals. One is going through and identifying the list, and then the second one is putting resource, is a goal resourced or not? And so sometimes the council adopts a goal and the mayor tries to look at all of the resources within the budget and allocates a certain amount of money towards that, and then the council during its review process can either increase or decrease or choose not to fund a certain goal. And so here there were 2 goals that were not funded, which was a professional marketing packet and then a feasibility study for the city campus.
I just want to make one comment about that. So I reviewed that material, and I think in the material for the budget we reviewed last year regarding that professional marketing packet, I think this is what we're now calling a sector analysis. So I don't want to delay the meeting, but that's
Just to be quick. So the initial question came back of what is the marketing plan, and there was an $80,000 price tag associated with the marketing plan. And so what we did in our response was we broke it into 2 pieces. One part was the sector analysis, and the other was actually preparing the marketing materials. And the sector analysis is kind of the data that will lead to kind of the glossy images and the things that we would hand out. So 2 pieces.
Thank you.
In terms of overall financial planning, there was kind of a broad concept of developing the capital facilities plan to complete that in 2014, and we identified approximately 120 hours of staff time affiliated with the updating of the capital facilities plan. Measure city services and then report that out to the community. The mayor has researched several survey options, primarily by the firm that did the Parks Bond survey last year. And I think it's one of his priorities to try and get that completed this year. And so if we can identify the funds available, he'd like to conduct that survey in the 3rd quarter and then be able to report that out to the citizens. The average cost of that would be about $15,000 per year for those goals that were identified by the community. Tourism business plan, we've completed a contract with Roger Brooks. In January, did an initial presentation to the community. Several of you were at that, and there's a report due from him this summer. This contract is actually with the chamber, if I remember. So the chamber was the actual contracting agency. I thought the city did contribute some resources to that. In terms of the neighborhood parks goal, there was a goal to update the neighborhood parks plan and in particular focus on Hillside Park. And so the Parks and Recreation Department has identified a process to have an initial public meeting on Hillside Park in the third quarter. And then to update the parks comprehensive plan in 2015 will take approximately 500 hours of staff time. As you may recall, we funded a parks planner mid-year in the budget. And so I think, if I recall, they're just getting started to doing the recruitment for that position here relatively soon. In terms of green infrastructure, there was an interdepartmental team formed. There's a plan for a check-in with council in May with a final deliverable in fourth quarter. Is there any other comment on this one? Okay. In terms of the healthy community, we have formed an interdepartmental team. I think there's two real goals that we wanted to accomplish this year. One was doing an inventory of programs that may be related to this in the city. And the second thing would be data collection and analysis plan in 2014. So I think one of the things, as we talked about in the strategic leadership team meetings, the senior leadership team meetings rather, is the fact that it would be very beneficial on Saturday that we have real clear and mutual understanding between what council wants to accomplish and what what we need to be able to produce. And so this initial concept was fairly broad, and I think there was kind of a vision of what this is. And so our goal for this year was starting to put some meat to the bones in terms of how you start to define what a healthy community is. And so this first plan or take at that would be kind of an initial data collection and analysis to start to paint the picture of what the baseline of what the community is in terms of overall health. Any questions?
Well, since you mentioned that, I know you have more to go on here, but there's these are coming up, and I'm realizing I'm not absolutely certain what each of them are. I don't know if some of my other colleagues on the council are feeling the same way, even those that were there with me last year, even though I wasn't there. But and I already feel by the process that we started tonight and know that we're going to readdress them in a couple of days, that we've already significantly improved on that, coming to a common understanding of these things. Go ahead.
Just in listening to Bob's presentation, two things popped to mind. One is that it would be helpful for me to see goals, whether they're 2013, 2014, or proposed 2015, sort of by a broader category group, not necessarily by the year. So, for example, there's transportation ones that are showing up in different years. I would like to see them kind of listed. Here's what we had for 2013 and where we are, 2014 where we are, and 2015 where we want to be. So that I'm thinking things like transportation. There's a community health component to a lot of them. Sustainability is in there, and economic vitality. I just throw those out there. You probably have better ones. But it would let me see what we're doing and where we're going to go with some of these big categories. The other thing was that in previous years, we had a different process. And you didn't necessarily always have action steps. And my question is more for you, Paul, on Saturday. For those ones in 2013 and 2014 that aren't done or that haven't been fully fleshed out yet, will we be trying to create some action steps for those, similar to what we've done for the 2015 goals?
No, the short answer is no. I think we're going to look at, and I think Bob has, that matrix that we talked about, is that coming up tonight still? Okay.
It is.
Yep.
So it's going to address part of your first question, but, and I think there's a number of attributes, like its funding status and what its phasing is over the year and whether it's on a work plan. And we're going to see that for all of these. And so, but the actual action items for them, it was not in our plan to discuss any further or develop any for past goals.
Right. And so, to supplement what you said, that matrix may need some additional supplemental information, but I think we can produce that for you by Saturday in terms of what you're, and it would probably be useful for you as well. Neighborhood engagement, again, there's an interdepartmental team formed. It's primarily, when we say that, it's sustainability and communications department, although there are some, other neighborhood engagement programs like Map Your Neighborhood, that's part of emergency management, and community National Night Out, community policing efforts that are part of that concept as well. But developing that overall inventory of programs and identifying a planning process or future programs that may be implemented in the future, which would lead to enhanced neighborhood engagement with the city. There was a desire to increase citizen voice, and so the administration put together the significant social media efforts that we have been engaging in. To date, we have over 2 million impressions in the first quarter via Facebook and Twitter. This was the first time we actively went out and solicited participation from the community on the council goal process, and we had over 120 responses on that. And there has been a desire for enhanced website improvements related to agenda bills and the goals to complete that by the fourth quarter. I-90 overcrossing, we've talked about that. They didn't approve, the legislature did not approve transportation package. And so, as we talked a little bit about it, we have some of these that we anticipate finishing, either have finished or will be finished here in the next couple years. And then some of these are ongoing commitments or projects. So what is not included in this presentation, which probably would be helpful, which is what you just mentioned, Paul, would be attaching some dollars to these affiliated projects. So, as we talked about on the estimated cost of a one full-time equivalent police officer, there's a dollar cost that could be, attached to what that is. So, when you look at the 2013 goals, 1, 2, 3, 4, approximately 4 of these should be completed by the end of the year. And then skate park should be completed by the end of 2015. Now, I think one of the things that is a challenge is, so the bike ped plan, as we think about these things, the plan will be completed by the end of 2014. Now, what does the plan say? The plan says you need to spend $18 million on making the improvements to to bring the plan into reality. And so that's not reflected on here, but I think as we go through and do the evaluation with the council on Saturday, we need to be cognizant of what those long-term costs, really are going to be on some of these programs. But the IPZ, once that's identified, the application submitted, that creates a permanent innovative partnership zone that would be ongoing. Same with intersection improvements in Route 200. 5-Star Cities is an ongoing philosophy of service, Lake Sammamish State Park. While they have some milestones that would be completed in those years, we view that as how you bring the park into the community, becoming actively making the state park an active and engaged part of our overall community. And so that's an ongoing effort. That doesn't necessarily stop. The regional center designation, while we would achieve that, there's a whole variety of things that go along with that was identified in the Central Issaquah plan. So there's targets affiliated with that, population targets, improvements that would have to be made related to that. And so looking at 2014 goals, some of these, again, have long-term costs. So the tourism business plan, for example, will have that plan by the end of the year, but there's going to be a number of specific recommendations that will get made out of that plan that will probably have ongoing costs. And so some of those we're going to have to start to identify. In that case, right now, we can't tell you what those ongoing costs are because the plan's not finished yet. So we'll have to determine what that may be, going into the future. The healthy community strategy, when you think about that, it's really, and even neighborhood engagement is related. Conceptually, both of those are aimed towards building social capital within the community, and social capital is related to a whole variety of things like enhanced safety, enhanced health, lower drug use in teens within the community. And so both of those strategies, while this initial year is going to be kind of a data analysis and collection, putting them in place, you're really creating an ongoing structure of staffing and costs that would be affiliated with those items. But when you start to do the cost-benefit analysis, we'd have to look at what that return on investment would be for a program like that. And so as we kind of go through those evaluations, we'll have to start to identify, like for example, in those two programs, what that potential ROI is. But I think what's important is as we evaluate these items and put them up, that that's like changing, that's steering the ship, and it's changing the direction that we're going within the community. So that's different than saying, some of the goals we identified on here of getting 8 flashing yellow arrows done by the end of the year. So as the council considers, these goals, I think it's important that we keep those in mind and what the impact is going to be kind of going forward, both financially and on the overall staff effort that would have to be done with this to produce that service. And then, again, 2015. So I think one of the goals that I heard from the council leadership was really looking at these items, looking at these goals and making sure that they are having a long-term kind of strategic impact on the community. And as you can see, most of the goals are focused in that fashion. So they're really kind of long-term in nature. I think that's it. Any other comments from my team members? No? Okay.
Mary Lou?
Just for consistency's sake, Bob, I noticed that in some of the 2013, 2014 ones where there's a plan, it's a physical plan, and you write it, you've shown that the plan gets written in a certain year, and you didn't put the outer costs in. But in the 2015 ones, and a lot of ones where it says plan, same scenario, like streetscape plan, you've shown it all the way across. And shouldn't it just be shown as a plan completed by 2015, and yes, we know that there's going to be costs associated with it later on?
So there's a couple items that would be related to that. So like on the streetscape plan, this is a 4-year window. And so when we started to get into the old town goals and started to do the evaluation of those, what we came to the realization was that those goals were much more complex.
The ones this year, yes.
Yes, than just getting something done. So when you think about a streetscape plan, there would probably be a public process, which we kind of talked about and identified. It would have to interrelate to the how it would fit with the overall comprehensive plan. So just the comp plan amendment, the docket for 2015 is completed. So we'd have to probably tie that into a comp plan amendment at some point in 2016, right? I'm looking for, okay. And then you'd have to think about what the financing would look like. So the plan may come to an end, but there's some interrelated pieces to that. So just doing the streetscape plan may be 2016, 2017 before that got completed.
Answer her question. If you look at the bike ped plan, that's all going to be done by the end of 2014. However, you said it's going to cost $18 million to implement. And so in one case, finishing the plan has the end of an arrow. And she was asking for the other things that were plan-oriented to have a completion date for the plan, not necessarily the implementation, or be consistent with however.
Hi. So in developing this timeline, I looked a lot at staff responses for 2015 goals, and a lot of them did run into 2016 or 2017 just to get the plans completed. But I was very literal on when the end dates were for like the bike ped plan. We know that plan will be done. So when I did this, I looked at what the actual goal was versus what the impacts of the goal would be in long term. So bike ped plan we'll know will be done this year. That doesn't mean that it's done and on a shelf, that there's plenty more work to do. But just to get the plans done, when I looked at staff responses, most did run into 2017.
Thank you.
You have another comment? Question? Okay, go ahead.
So when you began this part of your discussion, Bob, I think you said that this visualization might be very informative because we're showing how goals from years past continue on, and here we are adding 17 more or whatever, and so who's going to do all that, I think is what you were saying. And this is a really dramatic way of looking at it. So what would you do? What would be the steps then that you go to evaluate our goals? How could we ever add that much when we already are doing so much from 2 years ago?
Can I make an initial comment? So first of all, those are all proposed. I'm pretty sure there'll be something less than 16 adopted goals this year. We can control that. Just keep that in mind.
Yes, I have.
Right. And I think that's a very astute comment. I mean, there's one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about with the directors is there's only so much capacity, of the staff to be able to accomplish these goals and get them away. And there's only so much financial capacity that we have as a city to, get these goals completed and accomplished. And so we, I'll come back to the Healthy Community Neighborhood Engagement Program. I think we all think that's a very viable goal. There's good academic research on that. But, when the council makes a commitment to doing that's a I think what we're trying to say is that's a multi-year commitment. And when you start to put those programs in place, you build a constituency, you build staffing, you build, a whole long-term, kind of a bureaucracy, around that. And you build customers affiliated with that. And so, I think the thing we were trying to communicate here is if you say this is really important to the council that we do this for the community, that we identify that, and it's not one that, a year or two from now, after we've invested kind of the preliminary work, that says, well, never mind. We really say, okay, we're going to make sure we can financially sustain this program in place for the long term.
Go ahead, Tola.
How come the Old Town ones all go out through 2017? Because what I heard proposed would the actual plan would just be done in 2015.
So I think what was proposed was I'll give you a good example would be think about when the Central Issaquah plan started and when the Central Issaquah plan actually got adopted. And so we're talking about today, we're talking about a 2015 goal that would have to go through the budget process this year. And if it got, any funding and built into the work plan for 2015, we would anticipate probably at least a year to a year and a half of citizen input and process that would go into a goal like that. So if you think about the ad hoc committee that worked on the Central Issaquah plan, how long, Trish, did that take?
The task force?
The task force? Well, over a year just to do that initial work. And then that puts you into 2016. And then you've got recommendations that come from that you'd have to roll into the 2016 budget. And if there was a recommendation for a streetscape plan, for example, there's design work that would have to get done. There's a preliminary engineering that would have to get done. and then you're looking at 2017, and then you're probably looking at 2018 just to get this capital improvement plan.
But that's
submitted.
not applying the same standard that you applied to the other plans, like the bike ped plan, right? The goal, the response from the administration on the Old Town goal was bring together this group and have their recommendations by Q3 of 2015, right? So those recommendations could be plant petunias.
But that's not
done
us.
in 2015. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I interrupted you. I apologize. That's not the final streetscape plan. All that accomplishes, and that's part of why I think when there was suggested breakout sessions that would come on Saturday, is that opportunity to really understand what the streetscape plan is and really understand kind of the process involved. So what we've proposed so far in the staff response was just putting together an ad hoc committee that would look at all of that, give us some recommendations. One of those recommendations may be, you need to do a streetscape plan, and you need to do the engineering affiliated with that, and then there's a whole process that has to go through. So if that timeline and those arrows going forward are a little misleading, but if we had made that a 10-year timeline, those arrows would have ended maybe in 2018 or the end of 2017 or maybe 2019 on some of those.
Okay. So I have a couple comments to make, really first the objective of this part of the presentation, to look at the 2013, to look at the 2014, and then to line them up like this, was to give all of us a more comprehensive understanding of what we most recently tasked the administration and have budgeted or not budgeted related to goals, and that some of them are ongoing. Now we're in 2015, or for the Saturday, we're going to go through another exercise, and we're going to add to that. And so I think we have the responsibility as a council to make sure that we make those decisions on what to add in the full context of what we're already trying to do. And in fact, part of our intent on Saturday is to ask ourselves the question if there's anything in 2013 or 14 based upon this full 3-year picture that we might decide that some elements in 2015 are so important and that they may actually cause us to stop the investment on an old goal. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but we're going to ask that question. And to that end, Bob, I think a couple other bits of information to build this out. So this is a great start. I think knowledge of whether or not the past goals are already at least resourced, in other words, or if they're on somebody's work plan at all. And maybe you said that, but I think adding that to the graphic, and this is something we discussed, so I'm just reiterating some of the things we discussed earlier in leadership. So whether they're resourced and or whether or not they're in a work plan somewhere. And I think the completion status is, if there's a bar right now, it's active and then it ends. And I think I think you're showing that when you expect to end, but I think when we discussed it a little bit further, I think my intent was that what is it 50% done? Is it 0% done? Maybe, and I think maybe that might tie to whether or not it's currently resourced or in somebody's work plan right now. So this completion status isn't just the timeline, but it's truly, I think, something in terms of what % done. I mean, so we can talk about that a little bit further, but I would think for this to be useful, for example, I would want to consider, you've mentioned multiple times my 2 goals from last year, the healthy community strategy for one of them, and I don't think that's resourced at all right now, or very lowly resourced. And so it's probably not very far in terms of completion status. And one of the other things we asked about as well is it's what is the spend on it, or what is and do we have? So obviously, if we're doing it in 2014, it's been funded. There should be funds in the budget, even if it's just within somebody's work plan. So I think that other element too about the funding amount and or status if I were to look at the 13 goals, the 14 goals, compare them to what we're looking at in the set down at the bottom here, then that additional information about, is somebody working on it? Is it in a work plan? What's its completion status? And how much is it going to cost? And what's the status of that funding? Would be other information that would be very helpful for us in using this as a tool to in the selection process of new goals and and potential reconsideration of past goals. Because that's what we want it to be. We want this to be a tool for us to make decisions about new goals with full awareness of the additional work and or cost to the city in light of past goals. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any comments from my colleagues on the council about it? So that'll be something we'll be addressing on Saturday. Bob, did you have any other material in this presentation?
No, that was
This
it.
was this is your.
But as you
pinnacle
mentioned,
slide.
I think what we could do is a spreadsheet that would incorporate those questions that you just asked and
Yeah.
try and get that out by like Thursday so you'd have it
Yeah,
in
and
advance of the meeting.
Are we going to have projection capabilities? We're going to have a. Is there going to be?
Keith, you
Is
volunteered?
Keith going to be able to do PowerPoint presentations on Saturday?
Yeah, it should be.
We
it
should
should
put
be-
him in charge of the room. That way we'll for sure have it. And that's true.
It's in Bellevue, I can't be in charge of that.
Okay. So, but yeah, just a moment. So a spreadsheet is one thing, and I'm sure you've got some creative people somewhere, maybe sitting in this room even, who can, I think, and somehow getting it all together on one graphic as well. I know that might be rather crowded, but I think that comprehensive picture, if we can do it, you can use colors and symbols and stuff like that. Just a suggestion. Tola?
So is it your intention to potentially do sifting on Saturday?
Sifting?
Yes, sifting.
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 We're going to sift on Saturday. What do you mean? Could you be more
Well,
precise?
take out, say, how much do you want 2015, and do you want to take out some 2013 and 2014?
We're gonna have that conversation.
Okay. So we will have, because to me it seems like the place to have that conversation is at budget in the fall. It seems like you come up with your 2015 goals, and I'll wait. Sorry. It seems like the place to potentially do sifting is at the budget in the fall. You come up with your 2015 goals, and then we say, okay, if we're, how does that fit into the overall picture at budget time, right? And then you say, well, what do you want to, what's the overall picture look like, and what do you want to invest in?
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. This is something we haven't tried before. Bob, do you have any response or a comment to that?
I think it's a good comment.
My question would be, well, that's where have we started? When would we start? And what's the funding on the past goals would be important. That's where it could play in. It might be something. This is without prejudice. I'm not sure if we're going to really eliminate anything, right, from the past on Saturday. But if we saw something, and it's resourced, but it's not part of anybody's work plan until Q3 or Q4, and it's going to cost this much. I mean, we could make a decision this year on that.
Yeah. So, and I think our answer would be some of these are easier to define than others.
Sure.
So, and that's what we've talked a little bit about with leadership is council leadership was that there was maybe not even complete mutual understanding of what some of these goals were.
Well, your presentation tonight just iced that for me. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
So, we have, some conceptual ideas like just bringing up, we're not picking on your two goals because they're good goals,
yeah,
but
you are.
those two goals, for example, right, this year it's just a data gathering. And then it would be rolling into 2015, it would be really starting to identify some strategies. And you wouldn't see, and we don't really know yet what those resources would be. So your answer to that one, for example, would be, is it complete? Is it partially resourced? Yes. Is it fully resourced? No. We'd have to come up with, it's difficult to come up with a percentage because we don't know exactly what the strategies would be. But
Okay.
I think we'd come up with some ideas and concepts.
Understood. So all we can do is the best with the information we'll have available to ourselves. So, but again, I think the idea and why we'd want to do it is clear. And I know that I would, even if, I would want to know what's already on the docket, what are the strategic elements we're already doing, and can we really take these other things on? Obviously, we all think these are important because we propose them. But we do need to make the decisions on, what's a priority and what do we want to add and what do we want to retain. So thank you. Do you have more information, Bob?
No, I think our goal is we want to clearly achieve what the council wants us to achieve. And there was we felt a sense of disappointment that after we went through the whole budget process last year, at the end of the day, we were only able to allocate $90,000 to accomplish all the goals. So, one of the things we wanted to kind of be upfront about this year and work together with the council on this is understanding the financial implications and how it's going to fit long-term with the budget, so we don't end up saying we can get these things done and we got $90,000 to try and get them done.
Okay, thank you. Now, I had one more thing. This wasn't actually on the agenda, but really brief. One of the things we're going to be doing on Saturday, and oh, by the way, our facilitator for Saturday is here in the room. Christopher, could you raise your hand back there? So Christopher Wright's going to be facilitating, and he's already been working on an agenda and a plan, and Stacy and I have met with him once, and I'll probably talk to him again this week on that. And one of the things we're going to do on Saturday is we're calling them breakout sessions. So we're going to split up, and we're going to have groups of goals. There's going to be one breakout session about transportation, but at that same time, there's going to be another breakout session that deals with some of the other goals as well. And this is really where I think Christopher called it kind of the meat of it, where the true meaning of the words, do the action steps make sense? Do we really understand? Also leave no doubt as to the meaning and the intent of the goal. I've been listening to Bob. I've heard him say this whole neighborhood engagement thing. I pulled up my goal, and I'm listening to him, and there's clearly, it's just an example. But that's what we can't afford to have, right? We need to really make sure that us on the council and the staff, we have an absolute meeting of the minds of what this goal is and what we're trying to achieve. So the breakout sessions will help us do that, also refine that, because that will also refine the proposal that comes back to the entire group and what we're going to be voting on. And so that's going to be really critical. There'll be a facilitator at each one of those, and the subject matter experts from staff will be there as well. And they'll be equal partners with us as we discuss this. We might have a comment or a question, and they're going to be, they have the license to offer their own opinion and to help us, shape and get a proper understanding of what we're talking about. So that's going to be during the breakout sessions. We're kind of designing what those are. Bob has given me a straw man. I have a new one back I'm going to propose to you. But what we're going to do is there's going to be one breakout session with two going on at the same time, and then we'll shift and we'll do a second one with two other breakout sessions. And so we're going to have either 4 or 3 in each one. So all 7 of us, but we're not going to have 7 in one and 0 in the other. It's going to be 4 in one and 3 in the other. So we'll have more about that, but just that'll be a little bit different, but it's a very important part of the process. I think that was, other than that, the actual voting procedure and how many dots you're going to get is still to be determined. Any other questions or comments? So thanks everybody for sticking through the night, and thank you, Bob, to everybody and everybody in the staff who's here this evening. Like I said, sometimes I do public presentations, and when nobody leaves the room before the end of it, you've got a really good topic. So. Thanks for your support this evening. I look forward to see everybody this weekend. I think you're all going to be there from all the departments. And thanks for the work that you've done so far on this. Good night, and this meeting is adjourned.